Chapter 14:16. A black shadow was moving rapidly in the sky. It was Black Dragon Audiobook, who had been forced to become a temporary mount. The most ferocious knight in history, Feral, was standing on the dragon's head with his arms crossed. He looked ahead. The strong wind blew at his clothes and hair, but it did not move his feet. There are traces of battle nearby. Feral suddenly looked down at the ground below. Huge destruction could be seen everywhere on the ground. It could be seen that the person who did this had reached a very high level of power. This is Fafnir's aura. Black Dragon Audiobook, who had always been resentful of being ridden by Feral, could not care less about this shame now. There was a hint of surprise in his voice. Feral said, "It's just a bit like Fafnir's aura. Fafnir is not so weak." Black Dragon Audiobook simply rolled his eyes and said in annoyance, "Old lunatic, have you been locked up by the knights?" Old Fafnir died of a serious illness not long after the battle. The current golden dragon is his descendant. Unfortunately, it's a pervert. In fact, I always thought that old Fafnir died so quickly because he was angered to death by this unfilial son. Feral was silent for a moment, then said indifferently, "How is the new golden dragon compared to you?" Audiobook snorted. "That guy inherited less than half of the golden dragon's power. You can beat him however you want." Feral said, "Old Fafnir inherited less than 20% of the golden dragon's power in the beginning, but he can still stand shoulder to shoulder with Roland. The new golden dragon has good potential." Black Dragon Audiobook frowned and said, "Old lunatic, although I don't know what you want to do, it seems like you want to pull a team out. Did you run into some big trouble?" "They're back." "They? Who?" The black dragon could not help but be stunned. "That group of demons." Black Dragon Audiobook was silent at first. Then his body stopped high in the sky. This surprised the soul, witch and the granddaughter of the Sword Saint, who were chatting on the dragon's back. After a while, Audiobook slowly let out a breath and asked tentatively, "Old lunatic, so you haven't recovered from your illness?" It was very clear what had happened when Feral had gone berserk. At that time, Feral had almost abolished the entire knight system. It was only after a few heroes had joined hands that Feral was able to regain his composure. Among them was its master, Sword Saint Roland. Audiobook had seen Feral's crazy side before, so he had no choice but to fear this crazy old man. At the same time, he also carefully accompanied him. "I can't beat her. If I can, how can I just let any random cat or dog ride on my body? If it was a second person, they would have long been burned to ashes by its dragon flames." But after Black Dragon Audiobook said that, he regretted it immensely. Feral's illness was the one thing he hated the most. He was even prepared to flee with Leia at any time. Feral would really beat it to death if he went berserk. Unexpectedly, what he imagined didn't happen. Farlier looked ahead with bleak eyes. After a long time, he said faintly, "I'd rather it was me who was sick. That way, I could even end my own life." "Feral." The black dragon opened its mouth and wanted to say something, but couldn't say anything. Feral shook his head and said calmly, "Let's change the route. Kiriloa isn't in the werewolf territory. He seemed to have left not long ago, probably in that position." Feral pointed in a certain direction. The black dragon knew that this crazy old man had superhuman senses, so it wasn't too suspicious. It just followed the direction Feral pointed and found that it was the road to the 13 clans' territory. Why did this old man, Kiriloa, go to the 13 clans' territory? To pick a fight with Balegang? "Old lunatic, please show me evidence that can make me believe it," Audiobook suddenly said. Audiobook suddenly said in a low voice, "Otherwise, I won't let Leia get involved in danger. This is my last promise to Roland." He didn't say anything and just sat cross-legged on the black dragon's head, then closed his eyes. But in fact, when they arrived at the Torito clan, they still didn't find anything. From entering the inhuman territory to the castle to look for the Sword Saint, to the Magician Association to look for the secret steel, and then to Kiriloa in the werewolf territory, it was as if fate was playing a joke on Feral. No matter what, he was always one step behind. Before sunrise, The ancient city of Pompeii was as quiet as a battlefield after a fierce war. Of course, it referred to the ruins of the ancient city. With the ancient city as a development site, the homes of the Aborigines living around it were still very lively. But even the people who lived nearby for generations couldn't see the true appearance of the ancient city of Pompeii. This included the tourists who had traveled thousands of miles and even the archaeologists. Because the ancient city was surrounded by a large enchantment specially built by the Magician Association to seal off the battlefield of the Great War 100 years ago. Kiriloa and secret gang arrived at dusk and opened multiple layers of enchantments. When the enchantments were completely opened, they still didn't wait for Bale Gang's arrival. This cunning vampire is rarely late. Kiriloa quickly gave his opinion. Torito's territory has just been attacked by the Golden Dragon, so Bale Gang must have a lot of mundane affairs to deal with. Let's wait a little longer. It won't make a difference. The master of the secret steel tower was quite calm. Kiriloa waved his hand and walked directly into the real battlefield. He said casually, "Iron Lump, why don't we take a stroll inside first? I haven't been here for 80 years. I kind of miss it." He participated in the Great War 100 years ago, but he was obviously not the only one who participated. There were many excellent werewolf warriors among them, and there were even some who were better than him. Kiriloa asked himself if he was lucky enough to survive. He wasn't the strongest werewolf, so he was able to survive. Many of his fellow werewolves were buried here, and there were even some comrades whom he had a pretty good relationship with. The secret steel tower didn't intend to stop Kiriloa's movement, but instead followed silently behind. The streets of the inner ancient city were crisscrossed and extended all the way, and a majestic castle could be clearly seen in the distance. That was the place where the inhuman allied forces of Eurasia had last attacked. Like a meat grinder, it had swallowed the lives of many elite Inhumans. Kiriloa seemed to see the sword flashes 100 years ago. He walked and stopped, holding a pen from time to time to write his mood in his handbook. He had already smelled the scent of death, and his life would come to an end at any time. He might want to complete a work at the end. In fact, Kiriloa's wish before he died was very simple, and there were only two. First, as a warrior, to experience a hearty battle, regardless of winning or losing. Second, to write the last work of his life that he was most satisfied with. Speaking of which, why hasn't the Magicians Association repaired these destroyed streets and buildings? Kiriloa asked curiously as he turned back. The secret steel tower master said indifferently, "Anyway, there's a barrier here, and ordinary people can't enter, so we're too lazy to repair it. Besides, ruins, ancient cities, and the like are valuable because they've been through a lot, right? If they're repaired, this part of history will be covered up." "Ha ha!" Kiriloa patted the shoulder of his former comrade, who was serious in speech and manner. "I didn't expect you to have sentimental moments. I feel like I can write an autobiography for you. Thank you very much. We're good friends. Don't be like this. Don't refuse." Kiriloa leaned close to the secret steel tower master's ear as if he was begging. It seemed like that, but what he said was, "Secret steel tower, does your association still have people on duty here?" The secret steel tower master's expression didn't change as he walked calmly with Kiriloa, but he also said in a low voice, "No, the magicians are only sent here when the barrier needs maintenance. And I'm the one in charge every time." "Oh, so, besides you and me, there are other guests here tonight, right?" "Probably." As they spoke, a shadow attacked, and a loud bang suddenly rang out. On the street, a sandstorm rose into the sky, and Kiriloa and the secret steel tower master calmly dodged it. They were warriors who had been through hundreds of battles and naturally wouldn't be ambushed so easily. At this moment, they were more concerned about who was attacking them. It should be noted that the barrier was opened by the secret steel tower master, and only the two of them had entered. Before that, theoretically speaking, there shouldn't be anyone inside the ancient city. Kiriloa and the secret steel tower master landed almost at the same time. As the dust began to disperse, a shadow slowly walked out of the dust and slowly appeared, and then appeared in their sight. This is Caddy? Both Kiriloa and the secret Steel Tower Master were shocked at the same time. They stared in disbelief at the person who walked out of the dust and suddenly ambushed them. In front of them was a warrior who held a large shield and a greatsword, and this warrior also had very obvious orc characteristics. This was an orc warrior, and an orc warrior that both Kiriloa and the secret Steel Tower Master knew. Caddy, a name that had been far away from them for 100 years, but they would never forget this name. In the Coalition Army 100 years ago, the orc warrior named Caddy was like the strongest shield, always blocking the enemy's attacks for his companions. Caddy always stood in front of everyone and never retreated. He used his shield and his body to block for his companions until the end. Even when he was exhausted, he still didn't fall. Even when he was dead, he still stood. Kiriloa, it's not Caddy. The secret Steel Tower Master frowned at this time. Caddy's body has been taken away, so it's impossible for it to still exist. Look carefully, this is just a spirit. Grayish-brown skin, soulless eyes, and a body that was faintly translucent. Kaloya could see everything clearly. However, the figure in his memories evoked too many memories, so much so that he was momentarily unable to extricate himself. Kiriloa took a deep breath at this time and was on high alert. Suddenly, he said, "It seems that, whether it's true that the demons have returned or not, this place is really strange." At the same time, Kiriloa's eyes quickly swept across the surroundings. The secret Steel Tower Master also sensed it. He flicked his palm, and a light ball for illumination rose from his palm, instantly illuminating the surroundings of the long street. Under the illumination of the sufficient light source, they suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Those were the figures of their comrades who had perished in the final battle, those that they could all call out by name. They were like the dead who had returned from hell, like ghosts, emerging from different places one after another and gradually advancing. What the hell is this? Kiriloa was now drenched in cold sweat. Such a strange thing made it difficult for him to keep calm at this time. The secret Steel Tower Master forced himself to calm down and quickly said, "Maybe someone is playing tricks here. They can't be our former comrades, because after they died in battle, even their souls were devoured by the demons. We can't find anything at all except their corpses." Kiriloa roared at this time and stepped on the street. Suddenly, a crack extended forward. "Which bastard is it? How dare you blaspheme the souls of these heroes here? Get out here. I will never forgive you." But the spirits in front of him, in the form of warriors who had died 100 years ago, did not seem to hear him. Under Kiriloa's roar and step, they seemed to be stimulated by something and attacked Kiriloa and the secret Steel Tower without hesitation. The attacks of these spirits were shockingly powerful. They did not even look like spirits, but living warriors from 100 years ago. "Iron Lump, how dare you say that you come here once a year to maintain the barrier? Tell me, where do these guys come from?" Faced with Kiriloa's accusation, the secret Steel Tower Master could only smile bitterly. The only thing he could do was to think about how to survive the attacks of so many spirits. "Kiriloa, if the appearance of these guys is the precursor of the demon's return," the secret Steel Tower Master suddenly said solemnly, "after 100 years of recuperation, will the demons become stronger than before?" "How would I know?" Kiriloa said angrily. "I just know. Even if the demons have not become stronger and are still the same as they were 100 years ago, we may not be able to stop them. The new generation is too weak." The secret Steel Tower Master was silent for a moment before he said, "Back then, there were still many who did not fight. Other than me, there were several Tower Masters, the 13 Grand Dukes of the clans, your Beast King, and some hidden witches, and the Vatican." F***CK. Those guys you're talking about? Kiriloa snorted coldly. "Except for the Radiance clan, I've beaten up all of them 50 years ago. Do you think I can't beat them? Don't you know what kind of quality the new generation of the Inhuman Domain has?" The secret Steel Tower Master smiled bitterly again. This was the last smile he gave Kiriloa, because in the next second, the secret Steel Tower Master's head was cut off by a sharp sword, right in front of Kiriloa. Without any warning, the secret steel tower master died. Iron Lump. Chapter 14:17. When the head of the mithril tower master rolled on the ground and finally stopped at Kaloya's feet, the old werewolf, an old hero who felt that he had seen through life and death, suddenly realized that he had not seen through life and death at all. He hoped that he could die before his family and friends, but he did not want them to die before him, because he was about to die in the first place. According to human age, Mithril Tower Master was actually not young, more than 150 years old. But in the inhuman world where there were longevity potions, Mithril Tower Master was a magician in his prime. He was already the Tower Master of the Association's Secret Arts Tower, and he should be shouldering the overall situation for the Magician Association in the future. His future disappeared. Just like that, he disappeared easily and without warning, erupting with grief and going crazy with anger. At this moment, Kaloya instantly turned into a 3-meter-tall, hairy giant wolf that walked upright. He crazily knocked away the spirits of his former comrades who were besieging him. Their strength was still the same as before, or at least the strength of their attacks was the same. But they did not seem to have the ability to think quickly, and they simply unleashed their powerful strength. Kaloya did not choose to tragically slaughter his way into these spirits. He simply snatched back Mithril Tower Master's corpse at once, and then madly rushed out of the core of the ancient city. He was not afraid of anything, but he needed to bring Mithril Tower Master's corpse away from this place, because he was afraid that one day, Mithril Tower Master would also become like these spirits in the inner city. Behind him were the spirits of his former comrades who were chasing after him. Just as he was about to reach the entrance of the barrier, Kaloya subconsciously looked back. Looking at the huge, ancient castle in the deepest part of the ancient city, the fear that he felt when he fought against it 100 years ago once again struck Kaloya's heart. The entrance was just ahead, and perhaps he could leave in the blink of an eye. But Kaloya did not have the means to close the barrier. He was not a magician and did not understand the complicated things of a magician. If he really wanted to fight, he would use his fists and body the most. Would these spirits also rush out of the barrier? What kind of effect would they have on the outside world after leaving the boundary? These weren't things that Kaloya could think about in detail right now. He could not die in this place. At least, he had to take the body of the secret steel away. At least, he had to send everything here back to the inhuman domain. At least, he could not let the inhumans suffer a disaster without knowing it. At least, he had to give them some time to prepare. What they really did come back. Finally, Kaloya rushed out of the barrier's entrance. He suddenly stopped and then nervously observed the situation at the entrance. Time passed bit by bit. A drop of cold sweat slowly slid down his hairy face. But in the end, he didn't see any undead warrior rushing out of the barrier. He saw that these revenant warriors had even crowded at the entrance, but they did not choose to come out. Instead, after a while, they began to gradually turn around and disperse, finally disappearing into the inner streets of the ancient city. Kaloya stared at this scene in a daze, his body shrinking little by little. He removed his berserk state and only felt that the sea breeze before dawn was especially cold. Right at this moment, "Kaloya, what are you doing here? The entrance has been opened. Where's the secret steel man?" He heard the voice, hugged the corpse of the secret steel, slowly turned around, and looked at Balegan, who was slowly descending in front of him. The acting Grand Duke of the clan silently listened to Kaloya's account of the horror he had experienced half an hour ago without saying a word. In the end, Kaloya stopped talking and just dealt with the corpse of the secret steel man with a sorrowful expression. He found some small props from the secret steel man's body and fixed the head and body of the secret steel man. He even broke off a stone pillar of the ancient city and polished it into a stone coffin to put the corpse of the secret steel man in. At this moment, Balegan suddenly moved. He walked to the entrance of the barrier. Kaloya could feel that there was an invisible and strange force moving around Balegan. This was a spoil of war that Balegan obtained from the castle in the war 100 years ago. It had always been mysterious, and no one knew what function this spoil of war had. Are you going in? Kaloya couldn't help but ask in surprise. He thought that Baligan was going to activate this mysterious spoil of war and explore the ancient city himself. Baligan shook his head. No, I'm just going to block this entrance temporarily. The method of operating the barrier has always been in the hands of the association. I can't close this entrance, so I can only block it. Although you said that those souls don't know what they are willing to do and don't choose to come out, it's not a good thing to keep the entrance open. Oh, you're still thoughtful. Kaloya nodded and then picked up the stone coffin. Coordinates are still open. I plan to send the corpse of the secret steel man back to the association first, and then tell the Radiance Tower Master about this. What about you? Baligan pondered for a moment and said, Then I'll stay here and watch this entrance. Someone needs to stay here to guard. Then I'll leave it to you. Kaloya didn't say much. He held the stone coffin, jumped up, and soon disappeared into the boundless night. Baligan watched his former comrade leave. He slowly sighed, and then he gently snapped his fingers. On the stone floor, a black shadow suddenly condensed. The black shadow gradually emerged and formed a shape little by little. It finally turned into the shape of the secret steel Tower Master, just like the souls of the dead inside the ancient city. Baligan waved his hand at this time. The secret steel Tower Master beside him turned around with empty eyes and then walked into the entrance of the barrier. He walked into the ancient city inside. After a long time, Baligan slowly took out a black card from his clothes and stared at it for a long time. 100 years have passed. Traffic control in Fog City had been restored. Basically, because of the intervention of the Magician Association in the end, after casting a drizzle with a forgetting spell, ordinary residents didn't remember the terrible things that had happened in Fog City. It was still the birthplace of the British style that travelers from all over the world were familiar with. Peter Chan had just finished a video call with Miss Ing and immediately rushed to the most luxurious suite of the hotel. He came to deliver the tickets to the most important guest of the hotel. Master Chiu, we have booked the tickets for you tonight. There will be a special car to take you to the station when the time is up. Peter Chan knocked on the door and entered. Thank you. Luochio smiled at the manager who greeted him well. Miss May took the 2 tickets from Peter Chan's hand. But obviously, she didn't want to greet him. In fact, according to the original plan, Boss Luo would stay in Fog City for 1 night and then leave. Now, there were 2 more nights. Of course, this didn't delay his time. On the contrary, Boss Luo had a very comfortable time in these 2 extra days. Oh, yes, there's a letter here. It should be for you. Peter Chan took out a letter from his suit pocket, but there's no name on it, only the room number. I think it should be for you. Miss Maid took it, opened it, and glanced at it casually. Then she nodded and said, It's indeed for us. Thank you, Mr. Chun. You're welcome. Chun Bai did not stay here for too long. After delivering the items, he found an excuse to leave. In fact, he was going to prepare for his paid vacation. This was something that Miss Ing had casually agreed to. It was really great, wasn't it? Who's the letter? Luochio asked curiously. Miss Maid smiled and said, Leo. Oh, in front of them was a park with few people. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid arrived as tourists, there was already someone waiting for them, the orc girl Leo. Today, the little beastman girl was dressed more like a man. She wore a cap to cover her beast ears. At this time, she was leaning against a statue. She seemed to be bored and was counting the ants on the ground. Miss Lael, we meet again so soon. Boss Luo would always greet first, no matter who was on the other side. Hearing this, the orc girl seemed to be startled. She looked over in a panic. When she saw that it was the master and servant in casual clothes, she was relieved. She even looked at the 2 people in front of her strangely. It turned out that there were times when they wore normal clothes. You. Hello. She quickly got rid of this strange thought in her mind. Then she stiffly bowed at a 90-degree angle in front of the master and servant. Thank you for taking care of me last time. I can't thank you enough. Actually, we didn't do anything. Luochio smiled casually. Miss Lael, aren't you tired of bowing like this? It turned out that the little orc girl had been maintaining a bowing posture without raising her head. She then said cautiously, I heard that in the Eastern countries, if you want to express your gratitude, You have to be like this to be considered sincere. Eastern. Boss Luo smiled. The place where I grew up is not that far from the east. You don't have to be so cautious. Besides, maybe I should say thank you. Because Miss Lael and your companions really put on a wonderful show for me. The orc girl's face flushed red. Thinking of her gigantic image and the weird clothes, she wanted to find a hole to hide in. She wanted to die. Please forget about it. I'm using my lifetime of gratitude to beg you. This orc girl was a little shy. She didn't dare to raise her head. Boss Luo smiled and said casually, Miss Lael, why did you call us out this time? Mainly to thank you for your help. The orc girl calmed down and raised her head slowly. After hesitating for a moment, she said slowly, also, there's another thing. I don't know how to do it, so I hope I can listen to your advice. Let's hear it. Boss Luo turned his eyes. Lael thought for a moment and said, It's like this. After that night, someone from the night organization came to me and said he wanted to invite me to join the night organization. It's that night Dr. Bedivere. He said that I seem to have the ability to appease the berserk orcs, so he hopes to form a music tactics team and let me be the first generation member. Boss Luo and Miss Maid looked at each other. They were a little surprised, but they soon felt relieved. It seems that Mr. Bedivere has a very interesting idea. Boss Luo thought for a moment and said, But he should not only invite you, right? The orc girl nodded. Well, except for me, the other members of the band were invited that night, and my brother Oga was also invited. What's their answer? Lael said, Will, and the other two agree at the beginning, then that Mr. Chang said he still needs to think about it. And then it's Oga and me. Oga meant for me to make a decision, and I haven't made up my mind yet. So, I want to hear your opinions. Well, logically speaking, we haven't known Miss Lael for a long time. Luochio smiled and said, Why do you want to hear our opinions? The orc girl looked away from the boss's eyes and looked at the pool at the side. She said in a low voice, because it's very reliable, and I always feel that I'll get the right answer, and it's different from others. And what? Miss Maid asked with a smile. The orc girl quickly waved her hand and said, Nothing. I just feel that you two are much more knowledgeable than me, and can probably analyze whether it's good or not. Actually, I'm just asking. If you two think it's troublesome, please don't mind. It's nothing. Boss Luo said indifferently, but we'll charge for this kind of consultation. Lael, please think about it carefully. The orc girl was stunned and looked at the pair in front of her with confusion. They were always so mysterious that it made people want to explore more. She said subconsciously, but I originally didn't know, so I wanted to ask, is there a charge for this? Boss Luo chuckled, then slowly took out a coin from his pocket. It was just the most common coin in Britain. Luochio flicked the coin to the orc girl. She subconsciously stretched out her hands to catch it, and held it in her hands. This is... Luochio smiled and said, There are free options. I'll give this coin to you. Use it to make a decision. Agree to on the front and reject it on the back. Of course, the opposite is also possible. The orc girl was stunned on the spot. Can it be like this? But isn't this too childish? She couldn't help but frown. Boss Luo said, If it's a matter of indecision, whether it's yes or no, it has a certain weight. Since both sides have their own advantages and disadvantages, at least it means that both sides are equal. Since it's equal, the opportunity is naturally equal. So, Miss Lael will still think it's childish. The girl held the coin in her hand as if she didn't fully understand. After a while, she suddenly put the coin to her mouth and bit hard, leaving a small tooth mark on the coin. Then, she threw the coin into the fountain in front of her. Don't! The coin had entered the water. She looked up at the boss and Miss Maid, saying seriously, I don't know whether it's heads or tails now. But in fact, I already have the answer in my heart. I just want to get recognition. I'll come back here later and pick up the coin to see if the decision is right. She bowed 90 degrees to the master and the servant again. Thank you. Boss Luo smiled. In fact, I didn't do anything. It's your decision. The orc girl was still straightforward. She raised her head and showed a brisk smile, blinking her eyes. An uncle who worked on the farm told me that some people won't tell you what to do, but they can let you know what to do. Because as long as they stand in front of you, they will make you feel good. If you feel good, then no matter what you do, it's the beginning of success. So goodbye, you two. She ran away energetically, and her figure gradually disappeared from the park. What a spirited young lady. Miss May chuckled. She walked to the fountain in front, looking at the coin that had sunk to the bottom of the pool and reflected the sunlight, suddenly saying, "Will it be picked up by a tramp? How can it be?" Boss Luo smiled and then snapped his fingers. Since then, no one in the park had noticed the existence of the fountain. It stayed there quietly, and then there was a 50p lying at the bottom of it. No one knew whether it was heads or tails. Chapter 14:18. The train soon left the fog city and headed toward its destination, Losi. There was no train station in the famous university that Boss Luo claimed he was going to attend. He needed to arrive at Losi and take other means of transportation to get to St. Andrews. Of course, this was a carriage specially prepared by Peter Chan. It was not too shabby, and it could even be said to be the best VIP seat. At least so far, this carriage was quite quiet and comfortable. Originally, according to Peter Chan's intention, it was not a problem to book the entire carriage, but Missing insisted on only buying 2 seats. He did not understand the thoughts of the princess of the group, and he did not know that the princess of the group made such an arrangement, because Luochio was not the kind of person who liked to book the entire carriage. In short, the service in the VIP carriage was quite good. Miss Maid sat next to the boss. Boss Luo was reading a book bought from the bookstore at the train station under the dim light of the reading lamp. It was a book about ancient Egyptian culture and refinement. The servant girl would answer some questions for her master from time to time. Of course, maybe Cleopatra will know more about this. After answering another question, the servant girl pushed the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of her nose and said, "That's right, the servant girl was dressed as a professional teacher at this time. When did she change her clothes?" Even the train attendants did not know. "Would the two of you like something to drink?" The stewardess walked over at this moment and asked with a comfortable smile. Luochio thought for a while and was about to order milk. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the seat not far behind him. The man's voice immediately attracted the attention of the passengers in the VIP carriage, and they all turned their heads to look. They found that it was a very fat man. He gave people the feeling that he might be stuck in the chair. However, the man was wearing brand new clothes that looked expensive. His hair was combed neatly, and so was his beard, which looked carefully groomed. There was a white handkerchief hanging in the chest pocket of his suit. He seemed to be a very well-educated person. He was around 50 years old. The man said, "Oh, the beautiful lady in front, please give each of the beautiful ladies here a glass of gin-liqueur and a whiskey for the gentleman who's doing it. I've just encountered a happy matter, and I hope that everyone can share this joy with me." People generally don't reject the good intentions of others, especially for such a reason that is not worth rejecting. In the beginning, if one wanted to share, they probably couldn't avoid it. So they were soon pleased with the generosity of the gentleman, without gratitude, of course. Nobody here cared about the price of this little bit of wine. Most of the people in the carriage were either rich or noble. Of course, a curious customer immediately asked, "What's so good about it?" The man said happily, "Our servant just called me and said that my beloved pet, Lisa, just gave birth to 3 little cuties. My family has 3 new members today. It seems that he is a person who loves pets." This instantly won the favor of many women in the carriage. In fact, since the man started a treat, he had already won the favor of many people. Some people clapped their hands because of this happy thing of the man. Looking at the man who was smiling happily in the midst of many people's blessings, Luochio was no exception. He gently applauded for him. Miss May just looked at him with a smile. Nouveau riche. Just because his pet gave birth to children, is he afraid that others don't know how rich he is? That was a murmur from the seat in front of Boss Luo. Of course, the sound was instantly obliterated in the laughter of the crowd. Perhaps only the people in the seats next to him could hear it. "Thank you for all your blessings." The man nodded to the crowd and then slowly sat back in his seat, like the lead actor of the final curtain call of a stage play. He pulled the curtain down on this little episode. Soon, The stewardess served drinks to all the guests in the carriage according to the man's request. Perhaps it was an illusion, or perhaps it was something else, but the atmosphere in this carriage, which was originally a little quiet, seemed to become a little livelier. They could hear the passengers talking in a low voice. As for the man who treated them, at this time, he had closed his eyes and quietly leaned against the seat with a faint smile on his face. It seemed that he was resting or had fallen asleep. When the stewardess passed by, she carefully covered him with a blanket. In the seats in front, the club master and servant pair withdrew their gazes. They each picked up their cups and then gently clinked their cups, smiling at each other. It took nearly 6 hours for the train to slowly enter the railway station in Losi. Because it was early in the morning, there were not many passengers. The exit was particularly deserted, but there were already some people waiting here early to receive the guests. The friend who was arranged by Peter Chan to receive Boss Luo was also in the crowd. All the itinerary had been arranged. Boss Luo could rest in Losi for a day and then set off. In fact, it didn't even take an hour to get from Losi to St. Andrews. "Excuse me, are you Master Chiu?" The person in charge of receiving them was Asian, and he even spoke Mandarin more fluently than Peter Chan. "My name is Jin Zhongyan. Nice to meet you too. Manager Chun has already told me, so I will receive you two next." "Thank you." Boss Luo nodded. According to Jin Zhongyan, they would stay in the best local hotel for the next day. As for why it wasn't Song Dynasty's hotel, it was because Song Dynasty didn't have a branch in Losi. However, because of the hotel alliance, the hotel they were going to stay in would also provide the best service. The car was already parked outside the railway station. Jin Zhongyan was very enthusiastic, and he saluted Boss Luo and Miss Maid and opened the car door. When they got in the car, Luoqiu met the man who treated everyone on the train. He also got into a black car. The car wasn't cheap, at least it looked like it was of the same level as Boss Luo's car. This forthright and generous man met Boss Luo's gaze at this time, so he showed a polite smile, nodded, and got into his own car. This was the second time Boss Luo and this man had eye contact. "Master Chiu, what's the matter?" Jin Zhongyan followed Luoqiu's gaze and looked at the car that drove away first, and suddenly said, "Do you know the gentleman just now?" Luoqiu shook his head. "I just saw him on the train, not really." Jin Zhongyan didn't care and just nodded. "That car seems to be the special car of the hotel we're going to next. Maybe you can meet again today." Boss Luo smiled and didn't say anything. The car door was opened by Jin Zhongyuan, so Luoqiu held the servant girl's hand and let her get on the car first. Then he got on the car himself. The car left the railway station. It was about half an hour away from the hotel. In human territory, farm, the territory of the Torito clan. Maybe this place shouldn't be called the territory of the Torito clan anymore. Farm shouldn't be called farm anymore. The believers had started to discuss this issue. It seemed that the idea of renaming this place came from Master Amanda. Master Amanda was the most loyal person of the goddess, and she was the most pious person favored by the goddess. Since Master Amanda thought so, the goddess must have the same idea. Therefore, from the beginning of the discussion, there was an uncontrollable situation, of course, as the goddess body, and didn't know about this at all. She was now busy discussing with Sister Margaret, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, about the merger of the two sides. Yes, the merger of the two sides. The leader of the Revolutionary Army didn't think too much about N's proposal. After a simple discussion with her companions for half a day, she got the answer, yes. And her believers had the power to defeat the Torito clan, which was many times more powerful than the Revolutionary Army they had been running all these years. Most people even thought that this would be an important opportunity for humans to defeat vampires in human territory. It was a chance to gain true freedom. "That's all, Sister Margaret," and rubbed her eyebrows. "Is there anything else that you don't think is appropriate? It's already very good." Leader Margaret heaved a sigh of relief. She felt that she was really lucky. Simply from the conditions proposed by, and she felt that the Revolutionary Army was completely taken care of. What the Revolutionary Army needed to provide was to participate in the battle when needed. That was all. However, the Revolutionary Army was originally fighting against vampires, so naturally, they needed to fight. So, this kind of cooperation was equivalent to no sacrifice at all. This made Margaret feel that Anne's kindness was quite unreal, but she couldn't think of anything else that Anne would want from the Revolutionary Army. Force? The Revolutionary Army didn't have the power to defeat the 13 clans. Manpower? Manpower was barely acceptable, but the number of believers under Anne's hands was far more than the number of humans in the Revolutionary Army's territory, and seemed to have seen through Sister Margaret's doubts. So she said slowly, "In fact, in addition to participating in the battle when necessary, I also hope that the Revolutionary Army can be teachers and teach my people some other knowledge. Sister Margaret, you also know that these humans under my command have just been liberated. They don't know anything about the outside world, the world outside the farm. They even lack a lot of common sense, so I really need experienced people like you who can teach them unconditionally." She observed Margaret's expression at this time and continued, "Of course, this is not a necessary obligation, nor is it a forced. It can only be considered as my personal request. So, it's up to you whether you agree or not." Margaret smiled bitterly. "To be honest, in front of your conditions, I don't even have the courage to refuse your request. And teaching the liberated humans about the outside world is what we have always been doing. Even if you don't say it, or even if I don't order, my companions will take the initiative to do it. So, you can rest assured." "That's great." And Shung clapped his hands and smiled. For a moment, Margaret seemed to see the exquisite egoist, and she knew, but only for a moment. "Right, there's one more thing," and suddenly said mysteriously at this time. Margaret sat up straight and said seriously, "Say it." At this time, and blinked and said, half jokingly, "That is, whether it's Sister Margaret or the people of the Revolutionary Army, don't try to ask about the supplies I provided and the reason why I did some things that are beyond common sense. Because once curiosity breaks the mystery, the magic will disappear." Margaret looked at the playful and in a daze, then nodded slowly and said seriously, "Okay, I promise you. I'll tell my companions about this. Thank you very much," and smiled and clapped her hands. "Since the alliance has been formed, let's celebrate a little." She asked Amanda, who was waiting outside the door, to bring some good drinks. The human chefs who served the farm had now become the goddess. She became the goddess in front of everyone again. Even Margaret, who had been the leader of the Revolutionary Army for 30 years and experienced countless things, couldn't look straight at Anne's majesty at this moment. "By the way, Sister Margaret, do you have a channel to sell pure blood?" "Selling pure bloods?" Malu frowned and shrugged and said, "Yes, it's the sale of pure blood. Sister Margaret, there's no need to hide it, right? There are so many people in the Revolutionary Army base that need to be fed. In the past, you only relied on yourself to sell. How much can you earn? All of you, more or less, sold your own blood behind the scenes, right?" The leader was silent for a while before saying, "What do you want to do?" and licked her lips at this time. "Now, we have conquered the farm. You know, in the slaughterhouse, there are many pure blood products that have just been produced, and there's a considerable amount of inventory. Even the wealth of this clan is in my hands, so..." Seeing the change in Sister Margaret's expression, and Biao laughed and quickly said, "I'm super rich now." The leader of the Revolutionary Army felt that all these years were wasted. Chapter 14:19. The light door opened, and the first Tower Master of the Magician Association slowly walked out. This was Hui Yao's private teleportation room in the association's tower. Therefore, when Long Shuo and the little butterfly monster walked out, they did not see anyone. As for Fafnir, after it was packed up, it was casually thrown aside by the colonist Shinryu. The owner of Hui Yao's tower wanted to say something, but in the end, he swallowed the words in his stomach. "Teacher, if you're not in a hurry to rush to the battlefield site, please allow me to deal with the association's affairs first." "Well, 2 hours will do." "Oh, go ahead." Long Shuo nodded casually. Naturally, she would not really disregard this cheap disciple of hers. Besides, she also knew that Hui Yao must have a lot of headaches at this moment. After all, so many things had happened in the past 2 days and nights. As a role similar to the guardian of an area, there were indeed too many extremely troublesome problems. This was probably the reason why this Kelowna Shinryu became more and more lazy after the Kelowna administration in modern Kelowna appeared. However, the atmosphere in the association at this time seemed to be a little different. Shinryu, who had just walked out of this exclusive room, immediately noticed this. Hui Yao, on the other hand, also felt that at this time, the association seemed to be shrouded in a sorrowful mood. He immediately summoned a magician from the association for questioning, and finally received a shocking piece of news. The mithril tower master of the association was dead, and the legendary werewolf hero Kiraloya had personally carried the body of the mithril tower master back. Bring Kaloya to see me. Long Shirua saw a murderous look on Hui Yao's face at this time. She knew that this good-natured guy was really angry. Naturally, she was embarrassed to mention her previous request again. At least, she would not take the initiative to remind him. Fog City, somewhere at the dock. After the patrol officers had left, leaving only 2 of them behind to watch the news, the harbor was particularly quiet in the middle of the night. Of course, the light pollution of the city did not let this small, quiet place go. However, the watchmen didn't care. The 2 watchmen stayed in the small room, eating Walker's potato chips, drinking beer, and watching reruns of XX Explosion. Occasionally, they would let out some silly laughter. At this time, a yacht quietly approached this remote dock. The yacht seemed to belong to some rich man. From afar, one could see some expensive interior decorations. At this time, inside the yacht, there was a group of people wearing combat uniforms, preparing to log in. There was also an old man among them. His face was pale and bloodless, like a candle flickering in the wind, as if he would die at any moment. This old man was Mr. House, who had mysteriously disappeared for some time. He looked at the approaching dock. His eyes seemed to have recovered a trace of vitality. He was getting closer to the opportunity that could bring him back from death. After crossing the entire hemisphere, he was finally about to reach his destination. At this time, on the deck of the yacht, Nan Xiaonan was enjoying the sea breeze, silently gnawing on a piece of chocolate of an unknown brand. I remember that you didn't like to eat sweets in the past. A man's voice came from behind. Nan Xiaonan didn't look back. Hearing the voice, she knew that the person behind her was Qin, who disguised as Tang Tianlin. If people don't make some changes, they will be abandoned by the world, Nan Xiaonan said casually. He didn't know that his identity had been seen through long ago. He didn't even know that the Nan Xiaonan in front of him was no longer the one who worked in the same research institute as him, but a guest from another time and space. He just looked at the back of the woman in front of him thoughtfully. Just like back then, it was a pity that a few years had passed. As the yacht was approaching, he finally said, "Get ready to go ashore. There will be accurate information about the perfect man soon. I hope everything goes well." Nan Xiaonan shrugged and walked past him without any hesitation. Not long after, when the theme song of the TV series, The History of Everything, was played again, figures had quietly entered the dock and quickly disappeared into the night. The car slowly drove into the entrance of the hotel. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. In fact, they could have arrived earlier, but the guests in the car asked for a tour of the city. Jin Jin naturally had no objection to this. The better he could serve this Master Chio, the higher the reward he could get from Peter Chan, right? Here we are, 2 of you. Alec Hotel. Jin Jin opened the door for the 2 people in the back seat and did what he could diligently. Boss Luo got off the car and helped Miss Maid out of the car. After that, he glanced around casually. At this time in the morning, many guests were preparing to check in. In front of the Alec Hotel, there were already many people waiting, and it was quite lively. It was said that this was an old hotel with a long history. Of course, because of its long history, it used to be called a hotel. Suddenly, a roar came from the sky, and a helicopter slowly came and then landed on the tarmac. Jin Zhongyuan casually said, "Oh," and glanced at it. Most people were curious, and then didn't pay too much attention to it. Perhaps only the concierge in front of the hotel would pay more attention to the helicopter, because the concierge knew that the last guest who chose to come by helicopter was last month. And the guest last month was generous and noble. So he was a VIP who couldn't be offended. Soon, someone went to receive the VIP who came by helicopter. With the help of the concierge, a fat man slowly walked down from the helicopter. Because of his body shape, this man seemed to leave a deep impression on people at first sight. Jin Jung-in also saw him and said subconsciously, "We really see him again so soon. Right, Master Chiu?" Boss Lo naturally also noticed the man who came down from the helicopter. At this time, he just smiled casually at Jin Jong-yuan's question and then slightly bent his arm so that Miss Maid could easily hold it, and then walked into the Alec Hotel. Jin Jong-yuan carried the luggage and followed closely behind. He had received a lot of distinguished guests, because Peter Chan often introduced some guests that the Song Dynasty Hotel couldn't take care of in the local area to him, and let him be a guide. Therefore, he came in contact with many famous gentlemen, and naturally his vision was higher than ordinary people. But he didn't see how this Master Chiu was noble. But this Master Chiu's female companion really revealed a kind of awe-inspiring nobility from the bones. But even so, even though he couldn't see how noble she was, Jin Jong-yuan felt more nervous than when he received a member of the royal family. Not noble. Noble? Jin Jong-yuan shook his head, and suddenly thought of the fat man who came by helicopter. Simple, Jin Jong-yuan only felt that this man was essentially different from the famous gentleman he met. He was more like an ordinary person who suddenly had a lot of money. Maybe he was a guy who was lucky enough to win the lottery and then squandered it. Thinking of this, Jin Jong-yuan suddenly remembered that this man seemed to have taken a special car of the Alec Hotel to leave the railway station at the beginning. When did he change to take a helicopter just for a high-profile appearance? Maybe he was really just a vulgar nouveau riche. Jin Jong-yuan didn't pay much attention to it. When he was about to arrive at the front desk, he took the lead to go to Boss Luo and Miss May to check in for them. Coincidentally, the fat man who came by helicopter also came to the front desk under the reception of the concierge and was about to check in. "Mr. Dillings." Jin Jong-yuan heard the receptionist call the fat man Dillings. This was a name that Jin Jong-yuan had never heard of. But there were too many rich people in Britain, so it was not surprising that he didn't know. Not to mention that if he was really a lucky guy who won the lottery, he naturally wouldn't have heard of him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dillings. The room you booked is not ready yet. You still have to wait for at least 3 hours, because the guest in the room hasn't left yet." "Oh, that's really unfortunate news." Fat man. Dillings didn't show much displeasure on his face. He just slightly shook his head, but obviously I don't want to waste my time waiting for this kind of thing. "I'm really sorry. I'll check if there is a similar type of room for you right now." The receptionist at the front desk quickly said. Dillings smiled. "It doesn't matter, but I only want the best room. I changed my mind. Arrange a presidential suite for me here." The waitress suddenly opened her mouth, as if she didn't expect this. Then, she looked at her colleague who was checking in for another guest. This colleague was checking in for the hotel's presidential suite for the guest. Jin Jong-un listened to her with no expression on his face, but he sneered in his heart. "I'm sorry, Mr. Dillings. The presidential suite has been reserved." The receptionist at this time could only look at Dillings with a bitter smile. "And this guest is right next to you? I think there's a similar room here, of course. The price will be much lower. Do you want to take a look?" Di Linci still didn't give off the feeling of being overbearing. Instead, she seemed to be joking. "Miss, do I look like someone who would be distressed over money? But since there is already someone, then I can only give up." She was very grateful for the customer's understanding and quickly began to do the service. She peeked at Dillings and found that there seemed to be a trace of pity in his eyes. Feeling pity for not being able to stay in the presidential suite, the world of the rich is really wonderful, she thought. "If you don't mind, we can give this suite to you, Mr. Dillings." Jin Jong-yuan couldn't help but be stunned, because at this time, the mysterious Master Chiu spoke. Jin Jong-un turned around in surprise, looked at Boss Luo puzzledly, and even sent out a questioning signal. "You want to give this room to me?" Dillings was obviously very surprised by this matter and asked in astonishment. Boss Luo said with a smile, "Of course." Dillings frowned and thought for a while, and asked in confusion, "But why do you want to give this room to me? We don't seem to know each other." Luochio said casually, "Just take it as a reward for the gift on the train." "Mr. Dillings, thank you for treating me and my girlfriend to drink and for sharing the joy with you." Oh, so that's it. Mr. Dillings nodded with a trace of apology. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you at first. My memory is bad recently, and I often forget some things. It's okay. Luocchio waved his hand. Then, I wish you a happy holiday. Dillings might be a believer. He looked at Boss Luo and said with a smile, God will be willing to bless you too. I hope so. Boss Luo didn't comment. Jin Jian soon followed Master Chio's order and changed the room. Until they entered the elevator, he asked curiously, Master Chio, why do you want to give this room to that nouveau riche? Luocchio also asked curiously, Mr. Jin, why do you think he's a nouveau riche? The elevator was open, and they could see the situation in the hotel lobby. Jin Zhongyuan casually pointed at Dillings, who was still handling the formalities at the front desk, and shrugged. You see, this gentleman has been looking at the decoration of the hotel all the time, right? Indeed. Boss Luo didn't deny it. Jin Zhongyuan continued. Although the decorations here are considered luxurious, there is still a big difference compared to the real rich people's houses. It can even be said that it can only be said to be ordinary. Very few rich people would be amazed by such decorations. Usually, only ordinary people show this kind of expression when they come here for the first time. Well, they have never seen the world. Mr. Jin, it seems that you're very good at observing people. Boss Luo suddenly smiled. Jin Zhongyan said proudly, I've been working as a guide for the rich, so naturally I know a little. It's actually nothing special. Luocchio just smiled politely, and then looked at the crystal chandelier in the hotel lobby as the elevator slowly rose. Dillings was also looking at the chandelier at this time, and no one knew what he was thinking. Maybe it was as Jin Zhongyuan said, the really rich people rarely pay attention to such decoration. Or ordinary people rarely pay special attention to such a crystal chandelier. The crystal shines because of the light. Some people think it's like a diamond, so most of the time, people use it to pass it off as a diamond. Probably. Chapter 1420. Jin Zhongyuan wasn't a guy who needed to stay with the customers all the time to gain their favor. He knew very well that this would cause disgust among the customers. Therefore, after sending the customer to the hotel room, he left wisely. He would only appear when the customer needed him. This was why Peter Chan was so willing to introduce customers to him, because Peter Chan could always get the goodwill of the VIPs because of Jin Zhongyuan. This is my phone number, Master Chio. If you need me, I'll come immediately. He didn't even wait for the response of Boss Luo and Miss Maid, and left politely. Luocchio opened the curtains and looked outside the hotel. From here, he could see a man-made lake. He smiled. It seems that this hotel has a long history. Miss Maid was packing the luggage at this time. She raised her head and asked, Master, what do you want to eat for lunch? Boss Luo said, Well, let's go to the restaurant and have a taste. I heard that many customers come here for the chef. Okay. Hotel Alec, Presidential Suite. Sir, I'm Guthrie, the floor manager here. I'm very happy to serve you. A tall blonde man in a tuxedo, suit, and leather shoes, who was about 40 years old, was respectful to Mr. Dillings. He even didn't smile. Dillings looked at the floor manager strangely, frowning and asking, I remember that the floor manager here is Ms. Tiffany? The floor manager in front of him was slightly surprised at this time, then nodded, Yes, sir. But Ms. Tiffany is on vacation these days, so I'll take over her job temporarily. Sir, do you need her for something? I can contact her for you. Dillings asked curiously, Are you Tiffany's? I'm her nephew. The floor manager, Guth, smiled. Oh. Lindsay pondered for a moment before shaking his head. No need. Since she's on vacation, there's no need to disturb her. By the way, did she go home for the past few days? Aunt Tiffany is still staying here for the next few days, Gusfer said. She's enjoying the employee benefits. I'll contact Sir. No, there's really no need, Mr. Gustav. Dyram shook his head quickly. Thank you for your kindness, but I prefer to have a good rest. You see, I've been on the transport since last night. My apologies. Yusuf nodded. Then, do I need to wake you up for dinner, Mr. Dillings? No need. Lindsay waved his hand and smiled. Actually, I'm quite familiar with this place. I've lived here for a period of time. The housekeeper was a little surprised, but he didn't ask too much. He turned around and left gracefully, closing the door gently. At this moment, Dilling slowly heaved a sigh of relief. He stretched out his hand to loosen the necktie around his neck and unbuttoned his collar. Only then did he move his bloated body and lie down on the snow-white mattress, staring blankly at the ceiling. So, this is the presidential suite. He muttered to himself. It doesn't feel special. Apart from the price, staying here for a night was about 1 or 2 months' salary for an ordinary working class. He propped himself up and struggled to get his suitcase. For someone of his size, it seemed that every movement was clumsy and strenuous. He needed to use all his strength. He slowly opened a suitcase that looked quite luxurious. There was another suitcase inside, but it was old and yellowed, and the leather was even worn in some places. D. Lindsay's hands slowly touched the old suitcase, and then he gently opened it. There was a violin inside. D. Lindsay put the violin on his neck and picked up the bow. He put the bow on the string, but he didn't pull it. D. Lindsay closed his eyes and kept this posture for a long time. After a long time, he slowly exhaled, put the violin and the bow back into the old suitcase, and then put them into the new suitcase. D. Lindsay stood up with difficulty. He touched his big belly that blocked the view of his legs, feeling hungry. Alec Hotel, squash room. A woman in her 50s with a good figure was playing the last game with her friends. Soon, the housekeeper of the floor, Guziv, came. He waited for the woman in the squash room to finish the game before calling her out. In the seats in the rest area outside. Mr. D. Lindsay? The woman repeated the name in surprise, and then she carefully thought for a while before shaking her head. I don't remember him. Guziv felt strange. Aunt Tiffany, but I feel that this Mr. D. Lindsay seems to know you. Ma'am, Aunt Tiffany thought again. Maybe he knows me through other customers. Do you need me to arrange a meeting for you? Aunt Tiffany shook her head and looked at her nephew who was going to take over her job. As a housekeeper, we only meet customers when they ask for it. We don't take the initiative to meet them. Guziv nodded. Of course he knew this. He just suspected that Aunt Tiffany had some relationship with Mr. D. Lindsay, so he was curious. It seemed that there was no direct relationship, so he didn't say anything more and just found a random reason to leave. Aunt Tiffany seemed to be lost in thought as she watched her nephew leave. She subconsciously looked at the large artificial lake outside the lounge. Although he didn't remember ever receiving a customer by the name of Dillings, for some reason, this name felt vaguely familiar. Hey, Tiffany, another game? Tiffany waved at her friends who had sent her an invitation and went back into the squash room. It felt good to be able to enjoy life at her age. Every day was good, very good. The menu was not allowed to be changed. The menu was all decided by the head chef of the restaurant. At the same time, several menu combinations were provided. But after the menu was decided, all the food on the table had to be finished. This was the rule of this restaurant. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid enter the restaurant, they were informed by the waiter. Usually, the weirder the rule, the weirder the temper, the more it aroused the curiosity of others. The restaurant could be said to be overcrowded at this time. There were some empty tables in the corner, but obviously the location was not very good, so no one was interested in them. Well, it seems that we are still a bit late, Luo Chio said with pity, but he still led Mississippi Maid to the table that no one was interested in. At this time, excuse me, someone called Boss Luo and Miss Maid. The person who appeared in front of Boss Luo was Mr. D. Lindsay, whom he had met for the 4th time. He was sitting on a very good seat, an empty table, and he was the only one sitting there. At this time, D. Lindsay was struggling to stand up. He finally stood up with a friendly smile on his face. Excuse me if you don't mind, why don't you enjoy lunch with me today as a return gift for giving up your room to me? Please don't refuse. Miss Maid glanced at her master and found that her master was also looking at her at this time, so she showed a beautiful smile. Boss Luo looked at D. Lindsay with a smile. Of course. He pulled out a chair and sat down. D. Lindsay also sat down slowly and then called the waiter to add the white wine as an appetizer. Cheers to our acquaintance. D. Lindsay now showed his forthright and hospitality on the train. However, he was not elegant and seemed to be out of tune with everything here. Because his voice was really too loud, it attracted the attention of the people around, and they all looked at him curiously. It seemed to be very impolite to disturb others eating, but this Mr. D. Lindsay's voice seemed to be so loud. In fact, he was just talking normally. The waiters quickly began to order dishes for the customers who had gathered together at the last minute. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid were still thinking about what to eat, Mr. D. Lindsay had already decided. 1 stewed pork with beans, truffle red wine stewed rice, lime orange lamb fish with sour bean cream sauce, roasted quail with cream egg roll, stewed lamb knee with red orange sauce. And even though this was a customer who didn't seem to care about cholesterol at all, the waiter still hesitated for a moment before asking, "Sir, are you sure you want all of these?" "Yes," D. Lindsay said with a smile. "Of course I'm sure. Oh, right, there's one last thing. That's to remind your head chef Borg not to dip his finger in the sauce when cooking." "Yes, sir." The waiter was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly lowered his head and agreed. Damn it. How did this customer know about Chef Berg's bad habits? He couldn't help but look at the man and woman next to him who were still considering the menu, very worried that Mr. D. Lindsay's words would affect their appetite. But in the end, he found that he worried too much. The man and woman seemed not to have heard Mr. D. Lindsay's words and naturally ordered some dishes. Of course, they were not as exaggerated as Mr. D. Lindsay's, but ordinary dishes. When the waiter took the order and left, Boss Luo looked around and suddenly looked at Mr. D. Lindsay curiously. Mr. D. Lindsay seems to be very familiar with everything here, even the habits of that weird chef. Mr. D. Lindsay just smiled casually. "In fact, I haven't been here for a long time. I remember that there was a special stage here before." He reached out and pointed to the front. "This is the place. It used to be a small stage, and usually there was a piano on it. Later, the restaurant's business became better and better, and the restaurant's customers also increased, so the stage was demolished to make more space for this semi-open private room. Many years ago, about 20 years ago," Mr. D. Lindsay thought for a while, and then shook his head. "I don't remember clearly. My memory is not very good." Boss Luo smiled. "It's enough that you can remember that there was a stage there." Mr. D. Lindsay looked at the young man strangely, but he didn't know why he agreed with his words, so he smiled and said, "Yes, sometimes I'm afraid that I will forget that stage once existed. Now that I think about it, I am really lucky to be able to remember it. So, sometimes don't complain that the world is unfair to you, because you never know when it will give you care that you don't know." "Maybe." Boss Luo nodded and raised his glass to Mr. D. Lindsay. Mr. Dillings was obviously a talkative man, but his style of conversation was obviously not comparable to that of a rich gentleman. On the contrary, what he talked about were trivial matters of daily life. There was a rainstorm somewhere in England. In fact, the meat of lamb's knee was more delicious than the meat of lamb's rib. It was said that in Huaxia in the East, people would make pig's knuckle into a delicacy, which was really incredible. Could chicken's claws really be eaten? Unknowingly, several waiters pushed the dishes to the table. Mr. D. Lindsay ordered too many dishes, so he needed a dining car, and several waiters surrounded him to serve him. Every time a dish was opened in front of him, Mr. D. Lindsay would show a very satisfied and pleasantly surprised expression. He seemed to have infinite expectations for it. Or it could be said that he had an unimaginable expectation for everything. More accurately, he was full of enthusiasm all the time. However, the chef whose bad habit was exposed didn't appear. Because of this, it was said that the chef never came out to meet customers. Obviously, he didn't break this rule for Mr. D. Lindsay. This bastard, his dishes are still so delicious. Occasionally, Mr. D. Lindsay would sigh. Of course, his voice was still as loud as before. He might not be very suitable for the environment in this restaurant, but Boss Luo knew that Mr. D. Lindsay at least really liked the dishes cooked by this chef. The taste is not bad. This was Miss Maid's evaluation after tasting the dishes. This is already a very high evaluation, Luochio thought in his heart. After dinner, Mr. D. Lindsay wanted to invite Boss Luo and Miss Maid to the artificial lake outside, but he was rejected. Mr. D. Lindsay was a little disappointed and left after paying the bill. At this time, the restaurant was still very noisy, and the customers were sitting at their seats, talking about something. Some were serious, some were laughing, and some were chatting happily. Only one voice was missing. It was a voice that was only slightly louder than the others, and it was a voice that was free and easy. Mobile phone, advertising. 81 song. Chapter 1421. Mysterious owner. Yes, I heard that the identity of the real owner of this hotel has never been disclosed to the outside world. It is said that even most of the old staff in the hotel have not seen the behind-the-scenes boss. This was what Jin Jung-in told Boss Luo and Miss Maid about. After declining Mr. Dilling's invitation to travel with them, Jin Jung-in told Boss Luo and Miss Maid about the interesting story of Alexa's hotel. In fact, although they declined Dilling's invitation, the boss and the servant girl still took a stroll to the artificial lake behind the hotel. There was also a hunting area here, but it was charged and they needed to be accompanied by someone. They wandered around the perimeter of the hunting area. Mr. Jean knows a lot. Boss Luo smiled. Most of the time, the first impression of a person started from this. Of course, there was also the first impression, and it was most people's first impression. I know a little bit more. Jin Jung-in smiled faintly and looked at Boss Luo. The number of times his eyes fell on Miss Maid could be counted with one's fingers. It was not that he was not amazed and moved by this beauty, but he clearly knew that he could not be rude. Who didn't have some improper thoughts? However, the real life was still waiting for him. Although this young lady could be said to be the most beautiful woman he had ever seen in his life, to be honest, it was probably not as practical as the reward he would receive as a guide this time. Peter Chan offered a very high reward. Just a simple day of service was almost equivalent to a full month's income in the past. Since you don't know the behind-the-scenes boss, how does this hotel usually operate? Maybe because of Jin Jong-yuan's rules, Miss Maid was occasionally willing to talk to him or ask some harmless questions. Only then did he dare to look at this beautiful lady. Although he had no bad thoughts, it was always worth looking at such a beautiful person. I heard that there's a lawyer who is in charge of dealing with affairs, and he comes here regularly every month. Jin Jong-in said casually, but I don't know such a big shot. But I have a good relationship with several gatekeepers here. Boss Luo smiled. I think no matter who it is, you can have a good relationship with them. Jin Jong-un laughed and said, that's overestimating me. At the very least, I don't know the chef in this big hotel. There's also that old-fashioned Miss Tiffany. But I heard that her ability as the housekeeper of this floor is superb. Many hotels outside want to poach her with high salaries, but she still stays here. The boss and Miss Maid had tried the culinary skills of the chef. The chef who didn't show up got a good comment from Miss Maid. Is Miss Tiffany very good? Miss Maid asked casually. Jin Jong-in said, I heard that even if Her Majesty the Queen came here for a holiday, she would also appoint Miss Tiffany to serve her personally. So young, Master Chio, it's a pity that you gave the presidential suite to Mr. Dillings. Speaking of the powerful queen, Boss Luo glanced at the servant girl beside him and smiled faintly. Miss Maid thought that the master probably thought of the dictionary. At this time, Jin Jong-un suddenly stopped and looked at a certain spot in the lakeside walking area below the small slope. He said in surprise, what's the saying in China? Speak of the devil, and he will come. Isn't that Mr. Dillings? It was indeed him. His bloated figure always left a deep impression on people. He said during dinner that he would come here for a walk. So, it wasn't surprising. Since we met, let's go and say hello. Boss Luo smiled. At this time, Mr. Dillings was fishing. He almost crushed the beach chair under him, but now he showed a very happy expression. It seemed that he didn't want to care about the beach chair. There were no trophies in the buckets beside them, and there was no sign of the fish mark floating on the surface of the lake. Mr. Dillings didn't care. Perhaps he was thirsty, so he took out a cold bottle of Coke from the incubator beside him, biting the cap with his teeth and drinking it. He probably heard the footsteps. Then he looked back clumsily and found that it was the young couple from before, so he directly raised his hand to greet them. It seemed that he didn't care that they refused his invitation, but now they appeared here again. Actually, Mr. Dillings didn't think too much. He just felt very comfortable when the young couple got along with each other. He knew that he didn't fit in this high-end and traditional restaurant. Others looked at him as if he was a rough lumberjack. But they were different. How could a person who was willing to discuss how to eat chicken feet with him in a high-end celebrity restaurant be a bad person? Have you just started fishing, Mr. Dillings? Boss Luo glanced at the fish bucket, saying casually, "It seems that you haven't caught anything yet." "No, I've already caught a lot." Mr. Dillings laughed and then bent down laboriously, trying to take something out of the incubator to serve them. "Do you want to drink something? I seem to have bought too much. I don't think I can finish it all alone. In fact, I really wanted to drink it all, but I gave up after thinking about it." Jin Zhongyuan saw that Mr. Dillings was really suffering, or maybe it was because of his personality to please people, so he was very enthusiastic to help him. Mr. Dillings didn't care, and said as if he was talking with an old friend, "My wife told me not to sleep with her when I can't even bend down. She wants to find me a healthier so." It sounded very vulgar, right? At least Jin Zhongyuan thought so. Even in front of the beautiful woman beside Master Chiu, it seemed abrupt. "Your wife must love you very much." Boss Luo smiled. Without any hesitation, Mr. Dillings proudly said yes. It was just that his wife would be a little naggy. That was what every man of his age would be like when talking about the woman he had loved for the first half of his life. At this time, Jin Zhongyuan brought some delicious drinks for Boss Luo and Miss Maid. Mr. Dillings suddenly stood up and began to pack up the things here. It seemed that he was going to leave. Boss Luo looked at the happy drink in his hand, thought for a while, and drank it gently, then asked, "You haven't caught any fish. Are you going back now?" He said casually, "Yes, it's late. I have to experience the special spa and the massage bath. I have a program in the evening, so today's schedule is quite tight." He lifted the bucket, then the fishing rod on his shoulder, and finally the insulated box, and staggered back. The small plank on the water made a sad sound because of Mr. Dillings' footsteps. Jin Zhongyuan was really worried that Mr. Dillings would suddenly break the plank and accidentally fall into the water. Unexpectedly, what he imagined didn't happen, but Mr. Dillings really fell to the ground. His face suddenly turned pale, and cold sweat poured out, as if he was going to faint at any time. He grabbed the clothes near his heart. Jin Zhongyuan was shocked. He didn't have time to think about other things, and hurriedly ran forward. "Mr. Dillings? Mr. Dillings? Medicine. I forgot to take the medicine. My heart is not good." As soon as Mr. Dillings finished speaking, he closed his eyes and fainted. Later, Jin Zhongyuan contacted the hotel. Mr. Gustav, who was responsible for serving the guests of the presidential suite, immediately sent someone to send Mr. Dillings back to his room. Alec Grand Hotel had its own licensed doctor. As for whether he was as famous as the famous chef or Ms. Dini, it was still unknown. They successfully found the medicine mentioned by Mr. Dillings in his suitcase. This suitcase was opened by Mr. Gustav himself. As a floor manager, or even as an ordinary hotel concierge, it was a big taboo to open a guest's suitcase without authorization. But the situation didn't allow him to worry too much. So after hesitating for a while, Gustav decided to do it himself. As for the fact that there was a worn-out suitcase in this branded suitcase, Mr. Gustav was very confused, but he didn't say anything. But when he was about to close the suitcase, he inadvertently saw a very subtle mark on the side of the old suitcase, and his face suddenly changed slightly. He rolled his eyes, closed the suitcase, and then took out the medicine he found. The hotel doctor said this medicine was for a patient with heart disease, and it was edible. After a simple examination, the doctor confirmed that Mr. Dillings was indeed suffering from a heart disease. As for what kind of disease it was, only Mr. Dillings would know at the moment. "Thank you very much, sir." Mr. Gustav came to Jin Zhongyuan at this time. "You helped me successfully avoid a stain in my career, Mr. Jin." What else could Jin Zhongyuan say? The floor manager was a very senior employee in the hotel. He always wanted to know him, but it was difficult to find a way. At this time, of course, he had to ask him. "Oh no, get to know him well. It seems that there's nothing else." Miss Maid glanced at Mr. Dillings, who had taken the medicine, from a distance, and whispered in her master's ear. Boss Luo nodded, glancing at a brown notebook on the table, and said casually, "But it seems that Mr. Dillings will miss a lot of planned projects." You didn't say anything, just casually looking at the decoration in the suite. She smiled. "It should be redecorated not long ago." The decoration style is quite normal. Being average is already a high evaluation. Boss Luo thought to himself. He joked at this time, "It seems that I shouldn't let this sweet come out." Miss Maid chuckled. "To be honest, it's not to the extent that you have to stay here. And after a long time, there will always be things that will break down. Although the style is not bad, it's not the original taste." The master and servant whispered outside the room, and after a while, Jean Jong-in and Mr. Gustav came out. The floor manager expressed his gratitude again and promised to send some gifts on behalf of Alexa Hotel. As for Jean Jong-un, he was very happy to get Mr. Gustav's business card. "By the way, I heard that there's a banquet tonight, right?" Jean Jong-un casually mentioned at this time. Mr. Gustav nodded. "Yes, there's a banquet. A mysterious guest called about 10 days ago to make a reservation. This guest wants us to prepare a birthday banquet tonight and then invite all the guests to attend." "Oh my God, I'm actually preparing for this." Mr. Gustav already had a very good reason for interrupting the conversation. Jean Jong-un had quite sensibly said that he would definitely attend tonight. "We'll also attend." Boss Luo thought for a while and agreed. The birthday banquet of the mysterious guest was held at 7:30 in the evening, and now it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, more than 4 hours left. Finally, the doctor, a nurse, and a porter were left to take care of Mr. Dillings, who hadn't woken up yet. The boss and Miss Maid went to the shopping area, intending to buy some clothes to wear at the banquet as a way to pass the time. You saw it clearly? Miss Tiffany was trying on clothes with her friend in a shop. She also planned to attend the banquet tonight, so she was choosing a suitable evening dress. Of course, it was rented. "I'm sure I saw it clearly, Aunt Tiffany." Mr. Gustav stood beside Aunt Tiffany with lowered eyebrows. "It's indeed that private mark." Aunt Tiffany frowned. "I didn't receive any notice from Lawyer Zieg." Mr. Gustav said, "Maybe there's something that Lawyer Zieg doesn't know." She thought for a while and said, "How's Mr. Dillings now?" Mr. Gustav said, "I heard that he has woken up and is in good spirits. It seems that he will attend the banquet tonight." "Oh, is that so?" Aunt Tiffany pondered. Her friend walked out of the fitting room at this time, smiling. "Dear, what do you think of my clothes?" Aunt Tiffany said with a smile, "Dear Aunt, believe me, you're the most beautiful. I'll attend the banquet tonight. You arrange it." Tiffany said in a low voice, then walked to her friend, discussing the details of the clothes with her. Mr. Gustav left slowly. In the room, Mr. Dillings felt hungry again after waking up, but it seemed that he was fasted by the doctor, so he could only pour himself a cup of fresh milk helplessly. Opening the curtain, the afterglow of the sunset shone in. Mr. Dillings yawned, then groped to the side of the desk, opening a brown notebook on the desk. Each page had the same thing written on it. She sat in a car that was specially sent to pick her up. Arriving by helicopter. Presidential suite. Menu. Oh yes, there was a small tick behind them. Chapter 1422. The staff of some big hotels would have their own lounge, a rather small room. It used to be like this in the past. Even for a high-ranking position like the butler, the living space was not much bigger than the bathroom in the guest room, and it was rather messy. However, although Mr. Gustav's bedroom was small, it was very exquisite, like it belonged to him. After finishing the work at hand, Mr. Gustav quickly returned to his bedroom. After a simple rest, he still had to prepare for the banquet in the evening. He was a meticulous person, and because of this, Aunt Tiffany had been cultivating him as her successor. Starting from the lowest position as a concierge to the present floor butler, Mr. Gustav had established his own huge network of connections. He found that he unexpectedly liked his current job. Because of the huge network of connections, Mr. Gustav also had a very strong ability to gather information. At this time, he locked the door of his bedroom. After locking the door, Mr. Gustav quickly walked to the only small desk in the bedroom and opened the drawer. He took out a notebook and quickly flipped through it until the last page. On the last page of the notebook was a mark he drew with a pencil and based on his memory. This mark was exactly the same as the one he drew on Mr. Dilling's old leather suitcase hidden in the suitcase. At least, there was not much difference. After all, the mark here was drawn by Mr. Gustav based on his memory. This was a mark he accidentally saw on a letter. It appeared on a letter collected by the lawyer in charge of the hotel business. As for that letter, it belonged to the real owner behind the scenes of the Alec Hotel. All these years, Mr. Gustav had been sparing no effort to find any clues about the owner behind the hotel. It had become a challenge for him to live. It was said that even Aunt Tiffany had not seen the real owner of the hotel. This made Mr. Gustav very curious from the first day he became a doorman. Perhaps it was just intuition. His intuition made Mr. Gustav feel that the mysterious Mr. Dillings was very likely to have some connection with the owner behind the hotel. This could also explain why Mr. Dillings seemed to know Aunt Tiffany, but Aunt Tiffany didn't have any impression of him. Exposing Mr. Dillings' true identity was like a signal that was ignited, and Mr. Gustav suddenly became a little impatient. It seemed to be a ridiculous behavior. There was also a situation like this. In the middle of the night, one suddenly wanted to eat something and drove dozens of kilometers away just to fulfill this impulse life. Come on, let me see your true identity. Oh. But now he needed to change his clothes and start to adjust the final decoration of the banquet. Perhaps tonight would be a good opportunity? Mr. Gustav could not help but secretly look forward to it. Miss Maid was trying on the evening dress she had just chosen in the fitting room. It seemed that there was a brand-exclusive store that Miss Maid liked in this hotel. Luaccio knew that he also had the identity of fashion designer, but he did not have the slightest research in this area. But now he had memorized the exclusive brand of this store. While waiting, the other two customers were talking. From the content of the conversation, Boss Luo knew that one of the ladies was called Ms. Tiffany, the excellent floor manager that Jean Zhongyuan mentioned before. The other one was her close friend, called Xanthi. They were about the same age, probably at the age when the real time was waiting, but it seemed that they would also worry about some trivial things in life. From their conversation, Sui Xiong knew that this close friend, Xanthi, was a rich lady. She was fiddling with her clothes in front of the mirror, lamenting the frown on her face and complaining about her husband's recent high cholesterol problem. At this time, it seemed that Miss Tiffany's close friend was not an employee of the hotel, but a rich lady who often came here to have fun. Dear, actually I think Chef Berg is really good. You've been divorced for 5 years. It's time for you to start a new life, right? Ms. Xanthi suddenly brought up another topic. Ms. Tiffany, who was also fiddling with her clothes in front of the mirror, smiled casually. We're just good friends, just like you and him are good friends. Lady Xanthi naturally rolled her eyes. Don't tell me you still haven't forgotten that guy from back then. Perhaps it was something in the past, something that was more distant than 5 years ago, or even 10 years ago. But Miss Tiffany didn't show any displeasure on her face. Instead, she laughed. If you say I can't forget him, many people can't forget him, right? After all, he's such a charming guy. I suddenly remembered something. There was a waitress who was holding a customer's drink. She was so engrossed that she bumped into a pillar. Oh, Tiffany, I didn't know you could be so annoying. The guy they were talking about was probably a good-looking guy. Boss Luo faintly thought. Perhaps Ms. Xanthi used to work in this big hotel. She even had a love affair here. Perhaps it was a rich businessman or a young man with great potential. But now, she was living a life that many people imagined. Ms. Xanthi should have worked here before, and she already knew Ms. Tiffany when she worked here. Therefore, they maintained a friendship for many years. Is there still no news about that guy? Ms. Xanthi suddenly asked in a low voice. Miss Tiffany looked at herself in the mirror, and after a moment of silence, she slowly shook her head and didn't speak for a long time. She could only accompany her like this. After a short while, Ms. Xanthi found a new dress and fiddled with it. Miss Tiffany suddenly walked to the mirror and carefully looked at the crow's feet at the corner of her eyes, looking at the traces of herself over the years. The door of the fitting room slowly opened. Ms. Maid had already put on the evening dress she had chosen. Under the light, she walked in with a smile. Luaccio stood up to welcome her. So beautiful. Women liked such a compliment, and she didn't intend to be an exception. The evening dress was thus decided. Just at this moment. Dear, do you really intend to attend the strange birthday party tonight? I came all the way back here to celebrate your birthday this weekend. Now, what about the private couch I prepared for you? So many young women? Ms. Xanthi suddenly said with an exaggerated and unhappy voice. It turned out that today was Ms. Tiffany's birthday. Jean Jong-Yuen was sitting in the lobby of the Eric Grand Hotel to kill time, feeling bored. Of course, there were many snacks to eat here, and even free tea service. The massage chair in the lounge area could also be used for free. This was really a place for lazy people to spend a day comfortably. Of course, he didn't come here to enjoy himself, but to be able to come here whenever he was called, so he had to stay here. Of course, he also chatted with several bellboys to maintain their relationship, and also showed off the business card he had just received from Mr. Gustav. The bellboys naturally couldn't accompany Jean Jong-Yuen all day long. They could only stop quietly and then happily exchange a few words, usually about leisure topics on a rest day. You are really busy today. Speaking of which, it seems that there are more customers today than usual on the weekend. Jean Jong-Yuen looked at the busy lobby check-in desk. A bellboy said, "I don't know what happened today, but some customers suddenly came in the afternoon, and they all seemed to be invited." Invited? Jean Jong-Yuen was stunned. He remembered that there was a mysterious party in the evening. So he asked curiously, "They came to attend a mysterious party in the evening. It seems like, let's not talk about it anymore. Here comes a gentleman. I can't be here." His good friend's bellboy said quickly. "Who is it?" Jean Jong-Yuen asked curiously. He quickly replied, "It's Lawyer Zieg." Jean Jong-Yuen was surprised. He knew that this Lawyer Zieg was the guy who was entrusted with complex management by the mysterious behind-the-scenes boss of Alexa Hotel. He was also a rich man. Looking from afar, Lawyer Zieg looked like he was in his 50s, but in fact he was already in his 70s. His hair was completely white, but because of his dark skin, it might be difficult to judge his actual age. It was said that Lawyer Zieg only came in the last 1 or 2 days of every month. It was only the end of the month now. So why did he come here now? When Lawyer Zieg suddenly came, the management of Alexa Hotel was quickly alarmed. In fact, except for the staff who directly faced the customers, the staff above the management level were basically directly appointed by Lawyer Zieg. Managing the business of Alexa Hotel. If one didn't know, one might really think that Lawyer Zieg was the real boss of this hotel. But he really wasn't. At this time, a black old man, surrounded by a group of white people, came to a quiet room. Mr. Gustav also came at the first moment. He was now one of the members who was qualified to participate, but he was at the end of the line. "Mr. Zieg, why didn't you inform us in advance? That way, we could have prepared to receive you in advance." "Relax. I'm not here for official business today." Lawyer Zieg was a person with good self-restraint. At this time, he smiled and said, "I'm only invited today as a guest. In addition, I'm here to deal with some personal matters." Invitation. Is it because of the mysterious banquet tonight? Lawyer Zieg played with the cane in his hand and smiled without saying anything. The others couldn't guess Lawyer Zieg's intention, so they could only try to beat around the bush. Lawyer Zieg looked at the time and said, "Well, I'm a bit tired after a long ride. I want to take a rest. Let's go to the usual room. Is there a problem?" "Of course. Your room has always been reserved. Mr. Gustav, I think you'll be very willing to serve Lawyer Zieg, right?" "It's my pleasure." Mr. Gustav, who was called out, quickly stood up and nodded politely. "How long does Lawyer Zieg plan to stay this time?" On the way, Mr. Gustav personally carried Lawyer Zieg's luggage and walked in front to lead the way. "One night. If there are no accidents, I should leave tomorrow," Lawyer Zieg said casually. Lawyer Zieg said casually and then asked about Ms. Tiffany. When he came for official business, Ms. Tiffany was the one in charge of receiving him. Of course, it was not because Gustav was unhappy. He was just curious. "Aunt Tiffany is on leave today," Mr. Gustav said, "but she'll attend the mysterious banquet tonight. Lawyer Zieg may be able to see her at the banquet. Of course, if you need, I can contact Aunt Tiffany now." "No need," Lawyer Zieg thought. He waved his hand and said, "It's very ungentlemanly to disturb a lady's vacation, my Mr. Gustav." "You're right." Mr. Gustav nodded repeatedly. But he couldn't help but connect some scattered things together in his mind, such as the mysterious Mr. Dillings and the mark on the mysterious old leather suitcase in his suitcase, tonight's mysterious banquet, and Lawyer Zieg's sudden visit. "Oh, right. Before coming here, Mr. Gustav even heard a rumor that Mr. Dillings seemed to know head chef Borg, and even knew some of the bad habits of his head chef. After Lawyer Z came to the room, he suddenly asked curiously, "Mr. Gustav, is there any special guest in the hotel today?" Gustav understood, but he pretended to be puzzled and asked, "Why do you say so, Lawyer Zieg?" Lawyer Zieg said casually, "I saw the helicopter parked over there. It usually doesn't start, right?" Mr. Gustav nodded and said, "Yes, there's a guest today. He came by helicopter. He's now staying in the presidential suite." He didn't even intend to say Mr. Dilling's name. He just mentioned it and observed Lawyer Zieg's expression. But he didn't see any expression of expectation on the lawyer's face. Lawyer Zieg just nodded and encouraged Mr. Gustav with a few words, telling him to work hard and so on. Nevertheless, Mr. Gustav increasingly felt that Mr. Dillings, Lawyer Zieg, the owner behind the hotel, must have a special relationship with them. Oh, maybe after leaving here, he could visit Mr. Dillings. After all, he wasn't feeling well today. It was a very reasonable and impeccable reason. Chapter 1423. One of them. Simple people, action could only be considered action after the idea was put into practice. Mr. Gustav soon came to Mr. Dillings' room. But Mr. Dillings was facing some kind of trouble. Two doormen were trying on a tuxedo for Mr. Dillings. Mr. Dillings' figure would probably give most tailors in the world a headache. This was the largest tuxedo that the hotel could provide. The two doormen were trying to tie Mr. Dillings' waist. It was like a tug of war. Oh, damn it. I feel like I'm going to be cut into two pieces. This sh*t. It's so annoying. Am I going to become a German sausage? Mr. Dillings cursed loudly while suffering. When he saw Mr. Gustav come in, he quickly said, "Mr. Gustav, you're just in time. Come and help me. Let me end this disaster as soon as possible." Mr. Gustav had no choice but to step forward and help him. It took him quite a bit of effort to get Mr. Dillings to put on the tuxedo. Of course, there was the occasional sound of buttons being pulled. Mr. Gustav was even worried that the buttons would explode in the next moment. Damn it. Damn it. Even if you beat me to death, I will never wear this thing again. Really. I swear on the honor of my dead grandmother. Mr. Dillings gasped and cursed. Usually, such an oath wasn't worth believing. Mr. Gustav pretended that he didn't hear it, and then quietly made a gesture to let the two doormen wait outside the room. He pretended to ask casually, "Mr. Dillings, are you going to attend the banquet?" "Of course. Otherwise, why would I wear this suit?" Mr. Dillings was not in a good mood because of the tight clothes. Mr. Gustav understood and then smiled. "Excuse me, is there anything else I can help you with, Mr. Dillings?" "Oh, let me think." Mr. Dillings pondered for a moment and shook his head. "I don't think there's anything else. If there's anything else, I can find you, right? I remember the housekeeper is always on call." "Yes, Mr. Dillings." After thinking for a while, Mr. Dillings patted Gustav's shoulder. He didn't raise his hand, so one of Gustav's shoulders slumped a little. He could only maintain his smile and wait for the customer to speak. "You've worked hard," Mr. Dillings said. After thinking for a while, he continued, "But you still need to rest when you need to. Don't tire yourself out." Mr. Gustav opened his mouth, but in the end, he maintained a smile and nodded. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Dillings. Is there anything else you need?" "Oh, I'm still a little hungry. Can you prepare something for me to eat?" Dee Lindsay rubbed her big belly, which was firmly pierced. "Let that." "Who?" "Oh, that chef make me something to eat. I don't want to go out now. These damn clothes are so unbearable." Mr. Gustav didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he still maintained his professional smile. "I'll arrange it for you, sir. If there's nothing else, please allow me to leave first because I still need to serve Lawyer Zieg." When Mr. Gustav said the name Lawyer Zieg, he seemed casual, but he secretly paid attention to Mr. Dillings' expression. "Oh, go ahead, I'll do it myself." But Mr. Dillings didn't know who Lawyer Zieg was. He didn't even care that Gustav said he needed to serve someone else. Didn't he know that the housekeeper here served the guests of the presidential suite one-on-one? With this doubt in his mind, Gustav slowly left the room. Before he closed the door, he took a peek through the crack of the door. Mr. Dillings opened a small book in his hand and bit a pencil. He was thinking about something. Occasionally, he tapped his head with the pencil, and occasionally scratched his thinning hair. Tell me where this gentleman is going as soon as possible. Got it? Before leaving, Mr. Gustav ordered the doorman outside the door. But Mr. Dillings did not come out of his room until the dinner began. Mr. Guthoff was told by the bellboy that Mr. Dillings had gone to sleep after he had eaten his fill, and his snoring was very spectacular. The second one, gift, at 7:30 in the evening, the banquet started. The banquet was held in the open-air lawn of the hotel park. Not only could one enjoy the night view of the artificial lake, but they could also see the entire Alexa Hotel. Under the lamplight, the Alec Grand Hotel was like a symmetrical castle built with perfect lines. It was like something that could only be found in fairy tales. It was said that the original Alexa Hotel wasn't like this. After several renovations, it became what it was today. It was all the work of the mysterious hotel owner. The theme of tonight's banquet was Masquerade Ball. The guests would wear some simple accessories to cover their faces. Of course, most of the time, it was difficult to hide one's identity with simple accessories. Most of the time, it was just for the atmosphere. Miss Tiffany wore a simple eye mask. As for Ms. Xanthi, she wore a Venetian mask. It was obvious that Ms. Xanthi was very upset that her friend of many years chose to attend this masquerade ball instead of going to the birthday party with her. She really prepared a lot of young and energetic guys. What a waste. What happened today? I seem to see a lot of familiar faces. Ms. Tiffany suddenly whispered to her friend's ear. Really? Ms. Xanthi looked around. Ms. Tiffany pointed at two middle-aged men standing in the dining area not far away. The two over there, don't they look like George and Gobin? Who? Ms. Xanthi asked in surprise. Madame Tiffany shook her head and laughed. If they know that you have completely forgotten about them, they might cry. Forgotten? They were your pursuers back then. Ms. Xanthi tried hard to recall, and finally found two blurry faces in the corner of her memory. She woke up with a start and finally remembered who George and Gobin were. In Chef Berger's restaurant, there used to be a small stage for performing for customers, and George and Gobin were the musicians in charge of the performance. Ms. Xanthi said proudly, "Now that I think about it, I was very popular back then. Unfortunately, time is unforgiving. But at that time, all of them were power who liked to play the violin. You too." Miss Tiffany glanced at this guy who she didn't know was a bad friend or a good friend. Ms. Xanthi said at this time, "But now that I think about it, it was really a mistake to be obsessed with power. A man who suddenly disappeared in pursuit of his dream is really bad. And look, my God, I really can't imagine what George and Gobin look like now. They were actually quite handsome back then. Maybe Parr has become a greasy and fat middle-aged man now. Believe me, dear, when a man gets old, he will never care about his appearance. You can see what my husband looks like now." Miss Tiffany didn't say anything. Ms. Xanthi was probably the heartless type. She suddenly seemed to have a body that still had some capital at this age. She scratched her head and said, "No, I have to go and say hello to George and Gobin and relive the beautiful days of my youth. Tiffany, you take care of yourself." Miss Tiffany really didn't know how to stop this guy. She shook her head with a bitter smile and then asked for a glass of red wine from the waiter's plate. She walked slowly in the open-air banquet hall by herself. She really recognized some old faces that she hadn't seen for a long time. Some of the old staff who used to work in Alexa Hotel. What was going on today? Miss Tiffany didn't go up and greet those people like Ms. Xanthi did. After all, she didn't think she was as thick-skinned as Ms. Xanthi. And, in fact, she didn't have good relationships with people. She was old-fashioned, disciplined, and serious. They were all afraid of a boring woman like her. Even her ex-husband chose to leave because of the boredom of life. She felt that perhaps she had been boring for most of her life. So she began to change. She didn't always think about work. Occasionally, she would read books, do some beauty treatments, try some sports, and also watch boring but popular movies. She began to smile more than before, but when she smiled, she still gave people a sense of oppression. Miss Tiffany felt that she probably couldn't change it. Her life was still improving, but the number of friends around her didn't increase or decrease. Miss Tiffany You are really beautiful tonight. She heard a voice calling out to her. Tiffany slowly turned around and saw an old man with a head full of white hair and a simple eye patch. She even recognized the other party's identity at first glance. Lawyer Sieg, it's you? She couldn't help but be surprised. Why are you here? I've been looking for you. Lawyer Sieg walked slowly with a smile. I heard from Gustav that you would also attend the banquet, so I've been looking for you since the beginning. Thank you. Miss Tiffany smiled slightly. Then, she quickly realized that this banquet might have something to do with Lawyer Sieg. So many old employees had also appeared. According to her nephew, Gustav, the gentleman who stayed in the presidential suite had the mark of the hotel's owner on him. Did all of this mean that something special was going to happen tonight? Ms. Tiffany, happy birthday, Lawyer Sieg suddenly said. Lawyer Sieg suddenly said, then took out a gift box from his pocket. This is the birthday present I prepared for you. Please accept it. Thank you. Ms. Tiffany didn't refuse. She accepted it graciously, hugged Lawyer Sieg, and kissed him on the cheek. Lawyer Sieg joked at this time, "Oh, I think I must be envied now." Lawyer Sieg is as funny as always. Ms. Tiffany smiled. But you haven't told me why you are here. Don't tell me you specially came to give me a gift? She wasn't too surprised that Lawyer Sieg gave her a gift. Lawyer Sieg basically knew the birthday of every senior employee in the hotel. If time permitted, he would even take time out to celebrate with the employees. It had always been like this in the past. In Ms. Tiffany's memory, Lawyer Sieg had attended her birthday banquets several times. Of course, if he was just an ordinary employee, most of the time he would only give a small gift with a signature. He wouldn't appear in person. It was a kind of incentive mechanism. I just happened to be invited by an old friend. Lawyer Sieg blinked at this time, then enjoy tonight's banquet, Miss Tiffany. Finally, I wish you a happy birthday. Thank you. That being said, until now, the host of this banquet still hadn't appeared, but the guests seemed to have arrived. Number 3. Sound. It should be the most crowded time at dinner time, but the hotel was very quiet at this time because most of the guests were attending the outdoor banquet outside. Even most of the chefs in the restaurant were sent out to prepare food for the banquet. In the corridor, a bloated figure was walking quickly at this moment. Mr. Dillings. At this moment, his lips were a little pale. He was carrying an old leather suitcase with one hand and grabbing his trousers with the other. He was panting as he walked in the corridor. He overslept. Mr. Dillings couldn't help but sigh. He wanted to take a rest after eating. There was something very important to do tonight, so he hoped he wouldn't miss the time. Oh, damn head Chef Berg, why did his food taste so good? Suddenly being absent-minded. Maybe it was because he didn't exercise. Mr. Dillings suddenly felt a bit difficult to breathe. His heart seemed to make a sad sound like an overloaded old engine. He felt that his breathing was extremely difficult, and the sudden dizziness even made him lose his balance. At this time, the suitcase in his hand was thrown out. The suitcase rolled down the stairs of the second floor of the hotel lobby. Unlike a rubber ball, the suitcase would not be damaged when it finally landed. When the dizziness subsided, Mr. Dillings climbed up and saw that the suitcase rolling down the stairs had been opened. He was shocked and quickly walked down the stairs while holding onto the handrail. The violin and the bow in the suitcase were scattered in 2 places. Mr. Dillings bent down to pick up the bow with difficulty and then walked to the violin. However, a beautiful hand had already picked up the violin before he arrived. Mr. Dyram couldn't help but be startled. Oh, it's you two. Weren't they the couple he met several times today? Mr. Dillings looked at Boss Luo and Miss Maid's clothes, thinking that they were also preparing to attend the banquet outside. At this moment, the violin was in Luocchio's hand. After picking it up, Boss Luo stretched out his hand to stroke the back of the violin and then slowly turned it around, only to see that the bridge was broken. Even 2 strings were broken, and a corner of the head was broken. What a pity, Luocchio said softly. He held the violin with both hands, giving it to Mr. Dillings. How could he not see what the violin looked like at this moment? Mr. Dillings' face instantly turned black as he stood there in a daze. He kept muttering to himself, saying what to do, and so on, as if he would faint at any moment. In the end, Mr. Dillings took the violin in silence. Then he sighed slowly and smiled bitterly. I'm such a rash person. I can't do anything right. He didn't know if he was talking to himself or to someone else. He was probably talking to himself. Is this violin very important to you, Mr. Dillings? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Mr. Dillings didn't think much and nodded. It was given to me by a very important friend. I couldn't keep it well. If I say that I can fix this violin for you. Luochio looked at Mr. Dillings' eyes and said slowly, but the price is that you have to give it to me. Will you agree? Mr. Dillings was stunned. He looked at the direction the young man was pointing at and found that he was pointing at a notebook with a brown cover on the ground. This was his notebook, which was also in the suitcase. It should have fallen out together with the suitcase. You want it? Mr. Dillings looked at this young Oriental man inconceivably and couldn't help but ask why. Probably because you like it, Luochio said with a smile. Miss Maid had already picked up the leather case when the master was talking with Mr. Dillings. When she handed the leather case to Mr. Dillings, Miss Maid casually glanced at the mark on the leather case. Then, her eyes slightly moved as if she thought of something. Mr. Dillings thought for a while, and then shook his head with a bitter smile. Not to mention a notebook. If you can really fix this violin for me, I'll pay you double. Because it's really important to me. But even if you can fix it, it's too late. I can't wait that long. That's not necessarily true. Boss Luo smiled mysteriously and then took the violin from Mr. Dillings. Please wait for a moment, Mr. Dillings. While Mr. Dillings was in a daze, Boss Luo walked to a corner of the lobby with the violin and soon disappeared from Mr. Dillings' sight. Mr. Dillings had to hold the bow in his hand and stood there stupidly. Only Miss Maid looked at him, as if she was sizing him up. In fact, he didn't go far, but went to the back of the stairs to avoid their sight. Boss Luo picked up the broken violin in his hand. His palm naturally emitted a faint light. Then, he began to slowly wipe his hand across the head of the zither. The head, the shaft, and the pillow. The broken parts began to be repaired little by little. Even the broken strings. Boss Luo closed his eyes and finally put the repaired violin to his ear. His fingers gently plucked the new strings. You can use it to realize your dream. You will succeed. I'll wait for you here. It's fixed, Mr. Dillings. Mr. Dillings took the restored violin with both of his hands in disbelief and looked at it carefully. He even suspected that Boss Luo specially gave him a new one. But when he thought that Boss Luo only asked for a notebook, he felt that it was really incredible. No one would go other way to buy a new violin just for a notebook, right? How did you do it? Mr. Dillings looked at this amazing Oriental young man in amazement. It's a trade secret. Boss Luo blinked, and then Miss Maid handed the notebook to him. Then, according to the agreement, this notebook belongs to me, Mr. Dillings. Oh, okay. Mr. Dillings nodded subconsciously. If you like it, take it. Did he really do him a big favor, just like that? Looking at the two people leaving hand in hand, Mr. Dillings scratched his head and muttered, Good people. Number 4, please dance with me. Lady Xanthi walked around and came back. Although her expression couldn't be seen clearly because of the mask, her attitude and words clearly indicated one thing. She had gained a lot. It was probably the compliments of her young suitors. Oh, darling, are you going to stay here all night and drink wine by yourself? Since when did your life become so boring? Miss Tiffany didn't want to pay attention to this guy. She was tired of standing, so she pulled out a chair and sat down. Aunt Tiffany and Miss Sandy. A familiar figure appeared in front of them. It was Mr. Gustav. He walked slowly and politely greeted the two ladies. Gustav, you're still so handsome. How's your work? Miss Sandy said casually. Tonight's banquet was well done. No matter from the service, the setting, the orchestra that created the atmosphere, the food and drinks, they were all flawless. More importantly, Miss Sandy also relived the good memories of her youth. Thank you for your compliment, Miss Sandy. Miss Tiffany rubbed her eyebrows and said, Gustav, the anonymous guest who initiated this banquet, hasn't he appeared yet? Not yet. Mr. Gustav also shook his head in confusion. We can't even contact this guest. He just said that he would appear at the banquet. That's all. If the fee hadn't been paid in advance, I would have thought it was a prank. There are all kinds of weird people these days. Miss Sandy shrugged and said her opinion. Miss Tiffany suddenly asked curiously, Oh right, That Mr. Dillings you mentioned in the afternoon. Have you seen him? After all, it was very likely that he was related to the owner of the hotel. As a butler who had been serving the Alec Hotel, Tiffany was more or less curious. Tonight, it was mainly because of this Mr. Dillings that she came here. Miss Sandy was very curious about who this Dillings was, but the aunt and nephew obviously didn't care about her curiosity. Mr. Gustav shook his head. Not yet. Miss Tiffany slowly sighed and said slowly, "It's fine if you don't see him. Gustav, I'm a little tired today. I want to go back early to rest. I'll have my vacation tomorrow and return to work." "Aunt Tiffany, is it your first day off today?" Mr. Gustav couldn't help but be startled. Miss Tiffany shook her head. "There's nothing to do on vacation. It's more interesting to work. I'm not at the age where I can do nothing." Miss Sandy felt that this sentence really hurt her. If it weren't for the sake of these decades of good friends, she would have ignored it. She simply sat down angrily and complained. Miss Tiffany just pretended not to hear it and was about to leave the banquet hall. The lights suddenly dimmed, and Miss Tiffany stopped her footsteps. The sudden change also made the banquet hall suddenly quiet. Then the lights began to change. They began to intertwine and finally intertwined at the position where the orchestra was playing. Under the lights, a bloated figure was struggling to walk on the temporarily built performance stage. But his figure was too big. This should have been very attractive if it was a handsome man. The bloated man's face was wearing a fake beard and a fake big nose, which gave a very funny feeling. Even when the man walked to the microphone, one of the buttons of the tight tuxedo finally couldn't support and broke off. Oh, the banquet hall suddenly burst into continuous laughter. This might be a special performance for the banquet to make the guests happy. Something like a clown. "Isn't this Mr. Dillings?" Under the stage, Mr. Gustav, who also saw this scene, couldn't help but open his mouth. He really didn't know why the guest of the presidential suite ran on the stage at this time. And looking at the way Mr. Dillings was holding the violin at this time, did he want to perform on the stage? Why did Mr. Dillings run on the stage? Who can tell me? Mr. Gustav hurriedly pulled a waiter beside him and asked. "I don't know." Mr. Gustav frowned. He subconsciously looked for where Lawyer Sieg was, but he saw that the lawyer was watching the scene on the stage with interest at this time, with a faint smile on his face. This made Mr. Gustav even more confused. However, he didn't have time to think about it, because Mr. Dillings had already made his move on the stage. He gently placed the bow on the strings of the zither, as if he was planning to pull the strings. The guests under the stage were quiet. They were a little bit looking forward to what kind of performance this gentleman, who brought a joke when he appeared, was going to do next. Miss Tiffany just silently looked at the violin in Mr. Dillings' hand. That violin, she could recognize it at first glance. It was obtained from someone else in a very special way. She even regretted it and suffered, but now she had almost forgotten it. "Give it to me. Use it to realize your dream. You will succeed. I'll wait for you here." She slowly walked from the crowd to the stage, playing almost only a few preludes, but people had already recognized what this bloated Mr. Dillings was going to play. Canon D major. But Mr. Dillings' skill was too bad. He couldn't even be called a beginner. The intermittent sound of the violin made this performance quite different. Even the orchestra that was originally invited, and even the conductor, seemed to be unable to cooperate well with this gentleman's violin skills at this time. This was very bad. People began to talk that such a performance was likely to ruin this banquet. Unexpectedly, at this moment, suddenly several guests wearing masks walked on the stage. No one knew whether they were spontaneous or prepared in advance. These guests all brought their own different musical instruments, including George and Gobin, who not long ago recalled the memories of their youth from Ms. Anthe. Strangely, the orchestra invited by Mr. Gustav couldn't cooperate with Mr. Dilling's clumsy skills, but these guests naturally followed Mr. Dilling's rhythm and slowly played their respective instruments. Although all the sounds were mixed, they were still intermittent, occasionally stuttering, and even wrong notes. Mr. Gustav listened and even frowned. If this Mr. Dillings wasn't a guest of the presidential suite, if he didn't feel that he had any connection with the hotel's behind-the-scenes owner, there were too many ifs, so he had to endure it. However, Ms. Xanthe, who was sitting next to him, seemed to be fascinated by the performance and occasionally let out some laughter. She probably remembered some past events. Suddenly, the crowd began to disperse, as if spontaneously. The guests slowly retreated, forming a half-moon space. Gustav saw Aunt Tiffany standing in the empty space. She stood there alone and didn't know when she closed her eyes. He wanted to call her, but she slowly reached out her hand at this time. Her right hand stretched forward as if it was holding someone's palm. Her left hand also lifted up as if it was falling on someone's shoulder. She seemed to be not alone. She began to slowly move her body, following the flawed canon played by the impromptu orchestra on the stage. The moonlight tonight was perfect. It seemed that someone's figure appeared and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, appearing and disappearing, as if it was there but not there. I seem to see power. Ms. Xanthe rubbed her eyes. When she looked again, she didn't see anything. All she saw was her friend dancing there alone. Maybe she should stop her. After all, this behavior was too rash. But why should she stop it? She had never seen Tiffany like this before. She was like a young girl with a dream, wasn't she? And no one said anything. Amidst this clumsy performance and the solo dance, something seemed to flow through everyone's hearts, making everything quiet. The moonlight also gradually became gentle. Far away, outside the crowd, on the beach of the artificial lake below the banquet site, Ms. May took off her shoes and stepped on the white sand. Luocio was the same. He was gently holding her waist, dancing a round dance here. Number 5, Happy Birthday. Tiffany gradually slowed down and finally did the pose of the end dance. Her eyes were still closed, as if she was immersed in some kind of afterglow. Mr. Dilling's clumsy performance had also finished. In fact, he had stopped for a while, about a few minutes. Finally, Miss Tiffany slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were hazy, as if she saw a distant figure, gradually disappearing into the night. When she closed her eyes, he came with the onset of canon, D major. When she opened her eyes, he was gone at the end of canon, D major. Only she was still here. Ms. Tiffany suddenly felt an indescribable relief. She didn't even feel embarrassed for her different behavior. She slowly sighed and then looked at the bloated man on the stage. According to Gustav's description, she thought this must be Mr. Dillings. But she still couldn't remember who this Mr. Dillings was, although she had some guesses that this Mr. Dillings was likely to come for her, as if he had already noticed Miss Tiffany's gaze. At this time, Mr. Dillings took some effort to take out a note from his pocket. He looked at the note, walked to the microphone, and softly read, "I hope you will always be young and happy. I hope you can walk out of the haze of life. All the love is contained here." The voice entered everyone's ears and heart. Miss Tiffany opened her mouth slightly. She was about to say something, but the surrounding guests suddenly swarmed at this time. They shouted in unison, "Tiffany, happy birthday! Happy birthday! Long time no see. Do you still remember me? Tiffany, happy birthday! You're still as beautiful as ever. Tiffany, I really regret that I didn't pursue you back then. Happy birthday!" She was almost drowned in the blessings of the crowd, looking at those who took off their masks, one by one familiar faces. Those are the faces of the old people who used to work here. Miss Tiffany was suddenly a loss. At this moment, Lawyer Zieg slowly walked out of the crowd with a cake in his hand. He walked up to Tiffany and said, "Happy birthday, my dear Tiffany. I hope you like the birthday party I've prepared for you." Miss Tiffany was startled at first, then she felt relieved. Right, so this was prepared by Lawyer Zieg. Only Lawyer Zieg had the ability to invite so many old employees from all over the country. At this time, Ms. Xanthe also came out of the crowd, looking at her good friend with complaint. Obviously, she didn't know all this, but now she was helpless. "No wonder you rejected the birthday party I prepared for you. So this is the reason." She really loved this good sister of hers for decades. She hugged this happy person beside her tightly and looked at the people around her. It turned out that a 55-year-old birthday could be so wonderful. Miss Tiffany kept smiling, accepting the blessings of the crowd. She looked for the bloated figure who played the violin in the crowd. But he was no longer here. She didn't know when he left. Maybe later, she would go find this mysterious Mr. Dillings and ask him about the violin. She was always a little concerned. Sixth, flowing golden years, happiness and happiness. It was probably this simple. A 55-year-old woman didn't seem to have many things she wanted. She didn't have a husband now. She didn't even have her own children, and she had been single for 5 years. Life was so boring that it could only be decorated simply to see the unprecedented beauty. Miss Tiffany felt that she should sleep very soundly tonight. But before that, she wanted to see this Mr. Dillings once. Have you checked out? Yes, Miss Tiffany. This is the thing that the gentleman said he wanted to pass to you when he left. At the floor, the doorman put an old leather suitcase in front of Miss Tiffany and then left. The first thing she saw was the mark that Gusev had mentioned on the leather case. Miss Tiffany pondered for a moment, then slowly opened the suitcase, taking out the violin hidden inside with both hands. And the bow. She walked to the window, looking at everything outside that was gray. Downstairs, she seemed to see someone again. Who would have thought that she would wave at him? After waving her hand, that person slowly turned around and walked away. She kept walking and walking until she was far away. In the end, she disappeared. Miss Tiffany looked at it for a while. Then she held the violin and bow in her hands, closed her eyes, and softly hummed the canon major. Today was a beautiful day. Today was truly a beautiful day, like a dream or a fantasy. That hymn. Today it was time to draw a full stop. Mr. Dillings walked along the road alone, and from time to time glanced back at the marvelous Hotel Alec behind him. Then he finally met the master and servant of the club who just came back from the artificial beach. Miss Maid was still barefoot, and her shoes were held between her fingers. They came back arm in arm, and seemed to be whispering something. Seeing Mr. Dillings alone, Boss Luo took the initiative to greet him. "Good evening, Mr. Dillings." "You too." Mr. Dillings laughed. "You really helped me just now. Otherwise, I will definitely screw up the whole thing. If you have a chance to come to Hallstatt, you must contact me. I'll treat you well. Oh, look at me. I'll write you my contact information." Mr. Dillings patted his head, then began to search for his clothes, but he couldn't find a pen and paper. As for the suitcase in his hand, it was empty. "Write it here." Boss Luo smiled, taking out the notebook and a pen from Mr. Dillings. Mr. Dillings quickly wrote down his contact information and address in the notebook. "Mr. Dillings, are you leaving now?" Mr. Dillings nodded. "Yes. I have to catch the early morning flight tomorrow. I have to go back to work on Monday. I didn't tell my wife this time. If I don't go back in time, believe me, she won't let me sleep on the bed. That's too miserable." Miss Maid giggled at this moment, which was very charming. Mr. Dillings was stunned, thinking that this young man was really lucky to have saved the Milky Way in his previous life. Luaccio suddenly asked, "Can I ask you something, Mr. Dillings?" "Sure, go ahead." Boss Luo looked at the notebook in his hand, muttering, "Why are your last words on the stage different from what you wrote here?" Mr. Dillings gave a start, then thought for a while. "Well, I think it's better this way. Anyway, I'll always screw things up." Luaccio just nodded with a smile, then said softly, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Dillings. I wish you a pleasant journey." That's all. Mr. Dillings was still as straightforward as before, leaving directly after saying goodbye. But he didn't see that Boss Luo slightly bowed to him behind him. It had been a long time since a bus came to the bus stop outside Alexa Hotel. Mr. Dillings couldn't help but feel a little distressed when he saw that the bus had stopped running. Maybe he should ask the front desk of the hotel to call a taxi for him. But Mr. Dillings reached into his trouser pocket and sadly found that he had no money. He really had no money. He had spent almost all of his money on this trip and even paid for all of his private savings and 2 months of his salary in advance from his boss. He suddenly regretted so much that he even had an impulse to faint. God knows how to explain to his wife when he went back. Unexpectedly, at this time, a private car slowly approached Mr. Dillings and stopped. When the car door opened, a black old man in luxurious clothes waved at him. "Hello, Mr. Dillings." The old man invited Mr. Dillings into the car, looked at the puzzled Mr. Dillings, and smiled. "First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Sieg, and I'm the lawyer appointed by Parr to deal with his inheritance. Among his inheritance, one of them was appointed by me to give to you, Mr. Dillings." Mr. Dillings blinked, then scratched his head and asked confusedly, "Lawyer? Paz? That guy was so poor that he owed me half a year's rent. What inheritance could he have? Except for a dog. But even so, you're still willing to fulfill his last wish, aren't you? He came here from the distant Austria, and even now, he has nothing." Lawyer Sieg smiled. "I think that in the last moments of Potter's life, he must have felt extremely proud to have met a friend like you. Believe me, Mr. Dillings, you deserve this legacy. Your kindness and trustworthiness allowed you to pass Potter's test, and in the end, you even did better than him. So, Mr. Dillings, you'll get 40 million euros from Potter. What the F asterisk CK? How much?" Mr. Dillings jumped up, and his head hit the roof of the car. He couldn't help but yell. It was very painful. Number 7. All the love is contained here. After returning to the room, Boss Luo opened a bottle of red wine in a good mood and enjoyed the cool breeze with Miss Maid on the balcony. He opened Mr. Dilling's notebook and read it page by page. It contained all his plans for this trip, and each item was written very clearly. The last one was the completion of the list of things he needed to do. "Today I found something good," Boss Luo said with satisfaction. Miss Maid took the notebook from her master's hand and turned to the front of the notebook. There were words that were different from Mr. Dilling's handwriting. Miss Maid read the words in a low voice. "Hope, you know that I never gave up our dream. When you were lonely and sad, you couldn't get any help or comfort from me. Because of this, I feel very sad. All the love is contained here. Someone loves you silently, and he or she may have gone far away." Chapter 14:24. When he woke up in the morning, Miss Maid had prepared everything, including today's breakfast. The breakfast wasn't made by the chef, but by Miss Maid herself. There was a prepared kitchen in the room, and even the ingredients were fresh. Mr. Jean called, saying that the car is ready, and we can leave at any time. Boss Luo was reading the newspaper while drinking fresh milk. Hearing this, he nodded, folded the newspaper, and put it down, smiling. "I don't know if Taisetsu and Nero get along well these days." Miss Maid said, "They're both guys with good characters, so they should be able to get along well with each other." "That's good." After a simple breakfast, the short rest in this big hotel officially ended. Boss Luo met with Jean Zhongyan in the lobby of the hotel, and then took the special car to St. Andrews according to his arrangement. Before leaving, Miss Maid quietly put a letter in the suggestion box in the lobby, and finally returned to her master's side. "What did you put in?" Boss Luo couldn't help but ask curiously. Miss Maid smiled slightly, a small suggestion. Boss Luo blinked, but didn't ask further. He just rolled down the window and then stretched out the camera lens from the window, taking a picture of the front of this big hotel. "Let's go," Luocchio said to Jean Zhongyuan. Agrico Hotel attached great importance to customer suggestions. Usually, there would be a special bellboy responsible for receiving and checking the letters in the suggestion box, so that the management of the hotel could know what needed to be improved. This kind of service attitude was also the reason why it had always been favored. At this time, when several letters were taken out from the suggestion box and sent to the review room, a senior employee with reading glasses, who was said to have worked in the review room for 40 years, suddenly stood up. This senior rushed out of the review room at a speed of 100 meters and then took the elevator all the way, hitting 2 dining cars in the middle. Finally, he came to the door of the hotel general manager's office and hurriedly pushed the door open. At this time, the general manager of the Agrico Hotel was chatting with Lawyer Sieg about something. When he saw someone rashly barge in, his face naturally showed a displeased expression. However, Lawyer Sieg was quite familiar with this old employee in the review room, so he casually greeted him. "Old John, old friend, what's going on?" "Oh, Lawyer Sieg, you're here too." Old John was gasping for breath. "I didn't expect you to be here." "That's great. I think I have a letter here. Both of you must read it." Old John put the letter on the manager's desk. Both of them looked at it at the same time. It was just an ordinary white envelope. But when the envelope was flipped over and they saw the seal pattern on the seam, The two men who could control the fate of the hotel both slowed down their breathing at the same time. The general manager looked at Lawyer Zieg. Lawyer Zieg calmly took out a small knife, opened the envelope, and read it carefully. After a while, Lawyer Zieg didn't say anything. He even frowned slightly. The general manager couldn't help but ask, "Old Zieg, what's written on the letter?" Lawyer Zieg looked up and glanced at his partner of many years. He was somewhat puzzled. "It doesn't say anything special. It just asks for the small stage of the restaurant that was torn down before to be rebuilt. It also praises Mr. Berg, saying that his cooking skills are not bad. Finally, it asks him to slightly change some of his small bad habits in the kitchen." "Oh." The general manager was startled, then slowly sighed and sat down. He said subconsciously, "That's good. Wait a minute." The general manager suddenly stood up again. "So the boss came here? When did it happen?" Lawyer Zieg smiled bitterly. "How would I know? After all, even I have never seen it. Yes, no one knew the identity of the owner behind the scenes of the Agrico Hotel. Even Mr. Zieg, as the acting lawyer, only communicated with the mysterious owner through letters. Lawyer Zieg had been the agent for 50 years. At that time, he was just a greenhorn, and no one hired him. He was even ostracized by others. St. Andrew's Town, outside the town, in a quiet manor. About 20 days ago, this manor was still overgrown with weeds, and no one lived in it. But no one knew when it started, from the surroundings to the inside of the manor. It had become clean and tidy. The lawn in the courtyard of the manor was even neatly built. In the morning, the sunlight was scattered, and even the refraction of the sunlight could be seen. Judging from the situation, it was sprinkled not long ago. In the kitchen of the manor, a young man who always wore a scarf wrapped around the lower half of his face was now closing his eyes. At the same time, he was holding a sharp kitchen knife in his hand. Then, a square piece of energy tofu was thrown up. The young man raised the knife and cut the tofu pieces neatly, falling down like scattered petals. They were arranged neatly without even being placed on a plate. It was just like the unrealistic knife skills in Little Master. Yes. At this time, the young man carefully picked up the tofu pieces on the chopping board and then put them into the boiling pot on the table behind him. In front of the table, a girl with short white hair was drooling while holding a pair of chopsticks in her mouth. She looked at the pieces of tofu falling into the pot, and there were even little stars in her eyes. It was not until the young man covered the pot again that she lay on the table like a withered eggplant and stared at the flames burning in the gas stove without blinking. Taisetsu and Nero. Why is it so troublesome? Nero frowned at this time. Taisetsu sat upright and said indifferently, "Didn't you say yesterday that you wanted to eat sukiyaki?" Yesterday was yesterday. Nero complained, "You should have done it yesterday, not today. It's still breakfast time." Taisetsu Appa, "I seriously doubt that you can't find a girlfriend in the future." After getting along with each other for nearly a month, they were probably familiar with each other. Taisetsu, who knew her character, just grabbed the chopsticks fiercely and knocked the hand that was about to open the pot lid. "I want to duel with you." Miss Nero suddenly stepped on the table and pulled out her Yama sword. Taisetsu glanced at Nero expressionlessly and slowly poured fresh eggs into the bowl. "The boss and Miss you will be back at noon. Are you sure you want to have a duel? If you destroy this place, there probably won't be enough time to repair it. By the way, you have destroyed this place 3 times, and this is Miss Yuye's property." Miss Nero was stunned again. She grabbed her hair and said painfully, "Can you not mention this sad thing in front of me?" She hadn't finished copying the book as punishment yet. It was impossible to copy a book. It would never be possible to copy a book. She would never copy it, even if she was beaten to death. Anyway, she couldn't be beaten to death now. It's almost time to eat. Taisetsu opened the pot lid and ate without paying any attention to her. Nero's entire body softened at this moment, like a caterpillar. She crawled all the way from the ground, and then crawled onto Daz. She had mastered the magical body mutation ability of the Black Soul Envoy to perfection. She said in a voice that could make Taisetsu sick to death, "Taisetsu Appa, you won't say it, right? I know you're the best. Come on, Taisetsu Appa. I can do embarrassing things with you." You'd better use these tricks on the boss. Taisetsu gently exhaled and directly bounced the caterpillar Nero away. Nero patted the dust on her body and stood up. She muttered, "I'm afraid that Mississippi maid will kill me quietly." Taisetsu gave her a look that said, "It's good that you know it." Nero rolled back to her seat again and picked up her chopsticks, as if she had forgotten the upcoming fear of the boss and Mississippi maid. Or perhaps she was heartless. If you finish eating, quickly finish copying the books as punishment. Taisetsu put down his chopsticks and reminded, "You still have to save yourself." Nero stuck out her tongue and made a face. "I can't be saved. Anyway, I can't finish copying. At most, I'll double it. Then I'll continue to copy. Double it. If I can't finish copying, it's not a burden to have too much debt." Taisetsu shook his head angrily. "I'll go to the town later to replenish the ingredients. If you don't copy the books, clean the place again. You know Yui doesn't like dust." Nero said pitifully, "Taisetsu Appa, I can't do this kind of work. I'll go shopping, okay?" Taisetsu only thought for a moment and agreed. He was indeed worried about letting Nero clean. Before she became a Black Soul envoy, she seemed to spend all her time learning how to fight other than eating. More than 10 days ago, he did fight with Nero for some inexplicable reason. If he didn't have the Jeanlou's sword, he might not be able to suppress Nero's full combat power. Then, "I'm going out." After eating 6/7 of the shoshi soup, Nero excitedly turned into a wisp of black smoke and went out of the door. Since the last time she was rubbed on the ground by Daz, she was grounded for 10 days. She was so bored that she was moldy. Looking at Nero's excitement, Taisetsu couldn't help but shake his head slightly. He smiled and said, "You're really energetic." But maybe it's a good thing, Taisetsu thought. He still remembered her persistence in life when she said that she wanted to become a Black Soul envoy. He stretched his body and tidied up the things on the table. Then, he took a broom and began to clean. His life now was actually quite good. In Human Domain, the headquarters of the Magician Association, the sarcophagus was placed at the place where the Tower Masters usually gathered. The lid of the sarcophagus had been opened, and they could see the body of the mithril Tower Master lying quietly in the sarcophagus. As for the legendary werewolf hero Kaloya, he stood silently beside the sarcophagus. The atmosphere here had always been dead silent. In addition to the few Tower Masters and the deacons of the Secret Arts Tower, there were actually some onlookers, but they didn't appear in front of everyone. At this moment, Long Shual and the little butterfly monster were standing behind the screen behind Hui Yao's seat, which represented the seat of the first Tower Master. She didn't ask for it, but Hui Yao arranged it. The Thunder Tower Master was examining the body of the Mithril Tower Master. Until now, he heaved a heavy sigh. Although there was still sadness in his eyes, he still said in a low voice, "I'm afraid we can't use the resurrection potion." When one's strength reached the level of Tower Master, the death of the physical body didn't mean true death. As long as the spirit was not extinguished, there were several ways to resurrect the body. The key was that the spirit fire couldn't be extinguished. The Thunder Tower Master's judgment made the deacons of the Secret Arts Tower pale. As for the Crimson Blaze Tower Master and his wife, they frowned at the same time. The Thunder Tower Master shook his head and said, "The spirit fire of the Mithril Tower is gone." "How is that possible? Gone?" The Crimson Blaze Tower Master was the most impatient. He hurriedly asked, "Thunder, what do you mean it's gone? Are you sure it's not gone?" "Indeed, it's gone," the Thunder Tower Master said sternly. "Even if it's extinguished, there should still be a remnant. But I can't find a single trace of it on Secret Steel's body. It's as if his spiritual fire was forcefully dug out by someone." Whoosh! The Crimson Blaze Tower Master's body suddenly ignited with raging flames, like a furnace being blown by a blower. In an instant, the entire place became overflowing with heat waves. He even glared fiercely at the legend hero, Kaloya. The old werewolf leader was not afraid of the Tower Master's gaze. "Crimson Blaze, are you doubting me?" The atmosphere gradually became tense. As the first Tower Master, Hui Yao's expression was calm. He gently tapped the ground with his magic wand. He didn't even use a trace of magic power. Both Kaloya and Crimson Blaze were silenced at the same time. They looked at each other with disdain and snorted coldly. However, they quieted down for the time being. Hui Yao then said slowly, Kaloya, tell us everything from the beginning. You must tell us everything in detail, including the conversation between you and Beilegan. Kaloya nodded and didn't intend to hide anything. He started to tell the story from Huang Jinglong's attack on the werewolf territory. Everyone listened in silence, and their expressions gradually became more and more solemn, because they were in that place. Behind the screen, the little butterfly monster who was listening in a daze suddenly got close to Sister Long's ear and asked, Sister Long, what is the spirit fire that they were talking about? Actually, it's the soul that Kelowna talked about. Longshaw said casually, although the way they walk is different, these magicians can ignite the spirit fire and reach the level of the Taoist soul out of the body. It's hard to say which side is more powerful. I can only say that each side has its own merits. There are 3,000 paths, but they all lead to the same destination. The little butterfly monster still had a cute expression as if she didn't know anything. She had never been interested in the matter of cultivation. The Shinryu of Kelowna was too lazy to lecture this big-breasted butterfly at this moment. It was obvious that her talent had been transformed, but it was becoming more and more likely to turn a good hand into a bad one. What she cared about at this moment was what Kaloya said. What she cared about was whether this matter was related to Luochio. Chapter 14:25. In the hall, after listening to Kaloya's narration, the Tower Masters remained silent. Of course, they had the ability to distinguish whether what Kaloya said was the truth or a lie. It was precisely because they knew that it was not a lie that their faces became heavy or even ugly. 100 years. They're still back. Hui Yao's voice was very soft, but it could be heard by everyone present. However, the word sure that the first Tower Master used contained a deeper meaning. Could it be that the first Tower Master already knew that they were still alive after the war 100 years ago? This made Red Fire and the other two Tower Masters immediately think of an incident that happened a few years after the war. Feral of the Night organization went berserk and almost destroyed the organization. There's something here. The Thunder Tower Master frowned and said, We just received the information. According to our understanding, Feral escaped from the prison of the Night organization a few days ago. Now, his whereabouts are unknown. Could it be related to the matter of the secret steel? No one could give the Thunder Tower Master an answer. Hui Yao pondered for a moment and said, It's too early to make any judgments now. As for the specific reason, I'll personally go to the battlefield site to investigate and make a judgment. He began to give out orders. Red Fire, Frost, both of you stay at the headquarters and guard against the Michael Association's invasion. Thunder, follow me to the battlefield site. Also, arrange for 2 more deacons to follow me. As for the compensation for Fafner's destruction of many areas, I'll leave it to you, Frost, to deal with it. These were all expected things to be done, so they quickly nodded and agreed. The Radiance Tower Master thought for a moment and said, Oh right, let Deacon Ace personally go to the territory of the Toridu clan. The humans there have successfully overthrown the Toridu clan. Now, they seem to have established a prototype similar to a theocracy. They even have many weapons that can fight against the vampires. If it was a normal day, the Tower Masters would be very shocked by this matter. However, under the high pressure brought by them, the conflict between the farm humans and the vampire clans would be reduced by 1 level. Only Kaloya frowned and said, Radiance Tower Master, you said that the Toridu clan has been overthrown? When did it happen? It had to be known that he was still in Bailgang's territory yesterday. But at that time, the clan's territory had only been destroyed by Fafna. How could the territory be overthrown by humans overnight? I'm not too sure about the details. The Radiance Pagoda Master shook his head. Back then, I encountered some special matters and was held back, and now I can only observe for the time being. We, the Magician Association, won't take the initiative to mind the war between the 13 clans and the descendants of the ancients. In the end, this is their internal conflict. Kiraloya remained silent. No one knew what he was thinking, but he felt that everything was in a complete mess. It was as if something had suddenly stirred up a calm lake, causing everything to become turbid. No one could clearly see what the bottom of the lake looked like. Right, there's one more thing. The Radiance Pagoda's master did not pay attention to Kiraloya's attitude for the time being. Instead, he said, "This time I took in a student on my way out. She should be here with my token. If I don't come back, arrange for her to stay in my magic tower." The Radiance Pagoda master actually accepted a student? Looking at the reaction of the pagoda masters, it was obvious that this was a big matter. "Teacher, this time I will personally go there and accompany you to see the ruins of this battlefield." At this time, Huiyao used his spiritual sense to communicate with Kelowna Shinryu, who was hiding behind him. "Okay," Long Shirua nodded. "You just do your own thing. Don't worry about me. I'm just going there to take a look." Of course, if Huiyao was in danger, with Long Shirua's character, she obviously would not stand by and do nothing. For the Radiance Pagoda Master, with such a powerful partner like Kelowna Shinryu by his side, he naturally had more confidence. There were a total of 7 members of the investigation team: the Radiance Pagoda Master, the Thunder Pagoda Master, 2 deacons of the Secret Arts Pagoda, and Kiraloya. The other members were Shinryu and the little butterfly monster. This is the Eastern Evil Dragon that once gave the Inhuman Domain a headache. Kiraloya rubbed his chin and looked at Kelowna Shinryu, who seemed very thin and weak to him. "She's actually a girl?" Other than the few pagoda masters, there were very few people in the Inhuman Domain who had directly come into contact with Kelowna Shinryu. Obviously, this included him, the legendary werewolf hero. Kiraloya was purely interested in this Eastern Evil Dragon that gave everyone a headache. He really wanted to know how powerful she was, so he could not help but speak carelessly. However, the Thunder Pagoda Master was someone who had seen it before. Yesterday, when his body was controlled by the former First Pagoda Master, he was brutally beaten up by Kelowna Shinryu. At this time, after listening to Kiraloya's tone, the Thunder Pagoda Master immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly pulled this warlike guy who was about to be buried in the coffin and warned him not to talk nonsense if he still wanted to live for a few more years so that he could hug his grandson. Is she really that terrifying? Kiraloya could not help but be skeptical. In fact, his strength had reached a very high level, and he already felt that it was difficult to increase it anymore. He even felt that he was restricted by the shackles of the world level. The Thunder Pagoda Master said in a low voice, "I don't know if she's terrifying or not. Anyway, I can't fight back at all." Also, the First Pagoda Master said that if she really wants to destroy the Inhuman Domain, she can do it in less than half a day. Kiraloya was shocked at first, but he was not afraid. When he looked at Kelowna Shinryu from afar, he even revealed a blazing gaze. This kind of gaze was easily noticed by Kelowna Shinryu, who was thinking nonsense. Long Shirua felt hostility and subconsciously looked back. Her pupils instantly turned golden and looked at Kiraloya. With this glance, the legendary werewolf hero's heart seemed to stop. His breathing instantly quickened. "What the hell?" Long Shirua frowned. After a glance, she snorted and ignored him. She took Luo Dance's hand and walked in front. Later, the Thunder Pagoda Master patted Kiraloya's shoulder gently, which made this legendary hero come back to his senses. He muttered, "This even reminds me of the 2 terrifying guys we met in the final battle 100 years ago." At that time, the guards set by the former boss of the club were Kintaro and Eleanor. But this was just a small episode on the road. They were more concerned about whether the terror brought by them 100 years ago would really come again. They soon arrived at the entrance of the relics, but when they arrived, they didn't see Bailey, who was guarding here, as Kiraloya said. But the entrance was opened at this moment, like a gap in another space. From here, they could see the corner of the battlefield covered by the boundary and the gloomy streets inside. "What's the matter? Where's Bailey?" The Thunder Pagoda Master frowned and looked at Kiraloya. He shook his head. "How would I know? I'm not the bloodsucker's brother. But it seems that he didn't run in to investigate by himself, right? There seems to be a message left here." A deacon pointed at a stone slab next to him. There were words engraved on it. Apparently, the message was just written. It's really left by His Highness Bailey. He said that he encountered a strange situation, so he went in to have a look. Huiyao thought for a while. This wasn't the inhuman domain, but the modern world. It was impossible for him to collect a lot of information as easily as in the inhuman domain. Let's go in and have a look. Everyone be careful and be prepared. According to Kiraloya, there will be many spirits of the dead warriors who died in the war. Thunder, prepare the magic protection of thunder and lightning for everyone. The Thunder Pagoda Master nodded and gave everyone a thunder protection that could restrain the spirits of the dead. However, when he also gave Kelowna Shinryu protection, it was slapped away by Long Shirua's hand. How could this thing be better than her Kelowna Shinryu's power to ward off evil spirits? In ancient times, even the Emperor of Shinryu had the protection of Shinryu's energy, so he was invulnerable to all evil spirits, let alone her, a Shinryu from the land of Kelowna. In this regard, other than feeling depressed, the Thunder Pagoda Master had nothing to say. He couldn't afford to offend this crazy woman, so why couldn't he just hide from her? After a while, everyone was fully prepared and walked into the entrance. It was Long Shirua's first time coming to this place. Regarding the war 100 years ago, she had heard Huiyao talk about it intermittently. However, the moment she stepped into this place, she did feel an aura of the same origin as the aura of Luochio and Mismaid. Although it was very weak, it was so weak that it was just a faint aura that had remained for many years. It was said that during the war, many Black Soul envoys died here. Maybe it was the remains of these Black Soul envoys after they died. Long Shirua didn't know much about this, but this might be a good opportunity for her to understand the truth of the club from other places. In this situation, where she bypassed Luochio and Mismaid, whether she could see something that she hadn't noticed before. Because she knew one thing. That was, Luochio took over the shop later. During the war 100 years ago, the owner of the shop wasn't Luochio. There seems to be the sound of fighting in front. Kaloya suddenly turned back at this time. I smell the smell of Baligan. Let's go. The owner of Huiyao Tower said directly. No matter which one of them it was, their speed was naturally not much slower. Soon, they had found the place where the sound of fighting was coming from. It was a gladiator arena in ancient Pompeii City. After going through the audience seats, everyone saw that in the arena, the acting Grand Duke of the Torito clan, Baligan, was surrounded by hundreds of undead warriors at the center of the arena. Facing the siege of these undead warriors of the Allied forces, although Baligan's life was not in danger for a while, he was still struggling to cope with the enemy's fierce pursuit. The undead warriors seemed to have endless physical strength, and a normal strong person's physical strength would gradually be exhausted. At this moment, when everyone arrived, they saw that Baligan's face already showed a touch of fatigue. Tower Master, the two deacons hurriedly asked at this time. Huiyao pondered for a moment, and the wand in his hand had already been extended forward. A huge magic array instantly opened up in the sky above the arena. Then, a gust of wind was generated from the surroundings, instantly rolling up the sand that filled the sky and rolled up the undead warriors in the arena into the air. Then, the tornado rolled back and had temporarily buried these undead warriors in the sand. Of course, such a blow could not destroy these undead warriors, but it could only temporarily hinder their movements. Seeing this, Baligan was able to escape. In an instant, he rushed out of the arena and came to the front of everyone. Thank you for your help, Tower Master of Huiyao Tower. Baligan immediately expressed his gratitude to the owner of Huiyao Tower. Huiyao, on the other hand, took a glance at Bailey before he suddenly asked, These undead warriors don't seem to be weak at all. However, their movements are rather rigid. With your ability, you shouldn't be in such a sorry state. Why are you only defending and not attacking? This was also what Kaloya wanted to ask. He had fought with these undead warriors once, so he had a rough understanding of the power of these undead. If he really had a fight with them, he would not be in such a sorry state. Moreover, it was Baligan who he could not figure out the limits of his strength. The acting Grand Duke of the clan smiled bitterly and said, Before I figure out whether these undead are the souls of the soldiers of the Allied forces, how can I casually deal with them? Regardless of whether these words were sincere or not, at this moment, the words of the acting Grand Duke instantly made the Thunder Tower Master and the two deacons have a good impression of him. Even Kaloya looked at this old rival of his, and his gaze became more pleasing to the eye. Hui Yao simply nodded and muttered, "Baligan, I heard from Kaloya that you should stay behind to guard the entrance and prevent these undead from leaving the barrier. Why did you break in alone now? Did you discover something?" "That's right, I did find something." Baligan nodded. "At first, I was just monitoring the situation inside at the entrance, but I accidentally found an undead that looked very similar to the Mithril Tower Master. So, I had to investigate deeper." "What? You saw the Mithril Tower Master?" The Thunder Tower Master frowned, stepped forward, and asked again. Baligan nodded with a solemn expression. The Thunder Tower Master muttered, "I've checked the corpse of the Mithril Tower Master. His spiritual fire is completely gone. It seems that the undead you saw may really be the transformation of the Mithril Tower Master's lost spiritual fire. In this place, once the person dies, the spiritual fire will be deprived, and he will become an undead warrior?" "I don't know." Baligan shook his head. "Thunder Tower Master, if what you said is true, then why didn't this change during the war? In fact, in the 100 years after the war, the undead have never appeared. The Magician Association should send someone to check this place every year." "That's right." The Thunder Tower Master nodded. "And it's the Mithril Tower Master who is in charge of this matter. Over the years, there's been nothing special here." "Baligan, where is the undead that looks like the Mithril Tower Master you saw now?" Hui Yao suddenly asked. Baligan stretched out his hand and pointed. "It leads to that place. I chased all the way and passed by this place. Unexpectedly, I was discovered by the undead warriors here and was finally trapped. I remember this place. Back then, hundreds of our allied forces died in this arena. It was quite tragic." They looked up and saw that Baligan was pointing to a huge castle in the center of the ancient city. Chapter 1426. The Tower Master of Radiance did not immediately lead the team after seeing the undead that looked like the Mithril Tower Master walking into the huge castle, as Baligan mentioned. He first grabbed one of the undead warriors from the arena and began to study it with the Tower Master of Thunder and the other two deacons of the Secret Arts Tower. Naturally, Kiraloya did not have the technology in this area. He could only stand aside and stare. He even pulled Baligan aside and told him that the acting Grand Duke's territory had been overthrown. This was the first time Kiraloya saw such a wonderful expression on Baligan's face. "Are you sure you're not joking?" Baligan asked in a deep voice. This was also the first time Kiraloya saw Baligan with such a solemn expression. The joke made because they were old enemies stopped here. Kiraloya nodded and said, "This is what the Tower Master of Radiance said personally. How likely do you think it is to be a joke? So, do you plan to go back now?" Baligan frowned, but did not say anything. Kiraloya himself was also the lord of a werewolf territory. Of course, he knew that if his territory encountered the same situation, it would definitely explode on the spot. This vampire was really good at keeping his composure. Let's talk about it again when the matter here is over. After a while, Baligan seemed to have made a decision and slowly sighed. If the horror of 100 years ago comes again, we can't be spared. When facing them, all the contradictions can be put aside. Kiraloya just shrugged and said indifferently, "If I hadn't known you for more than 200 years, I would have almost believed it." Baligan just pretended not to hear it and then said indifferently, "Except for the two Tower Masters and the deacons of the association, what is the origin of the other two? I have a very strange impression of them." "Do you want to know?" Kiraloya asked in a serious manner. Baligan was silent for a moment and finally nodded. The legendary old werewolf hero leaned over with a cautious look. Finally, he said softly, "Ask her yourself. You didn't die here in the war. It is indeed the greatest injustice to those who died in the war." Baligan responded with a blank expression. Then, the old werewolf hero laughed. At this moment, Hui Yao and the others had already gained a little understanding of the undead creature's research. He called everyone who was scattered around. After that, he waved his hand and pressed the undead warriors that he had captured onto the ground so that they would not be able to move. What's the result? Kaloya poked his head forward and stared curiously. Initial confirmation is that these specters aren't the main bodies, the Radiance Tower Master said with a stern expression. However, they are indeed the heroic souls of the warriors who died in battle. No. Again? What do you mean? Kaloya immediately scratched his head. The Radiance Tower Master said, to put it simply, this undead, and even the other undead here, are very likely to have been replicated through some sort of method. They exist as clones. Copy? Kaloya immediately frowned. What method can copy undead? Radiance Pagoda Master, you have to understand that these fellows are generally not weak. Are you sure you have a way to replicate all of them? Their methods are unknown, but if they have 100 years to focus on this aspect, perhaps someone will be able to do it. The Radiance Tower Master said seriously. Besides, even if we don't have such methods, it doesn't mean that they don't. It was as if any inconceivable matter could be convinced as long as they were the reason. Even if the few here were already the best of the best amongst the Inhumans, they themselves were an inconceivable amalgamation. So, Kaloyeth slapped his head at this time. Radiance Tower Master, do you mean that you also think that they have indeed returned and are even plotting something? Everything here is just the beginning? The Radiance Tower Master shook his head. I'm not sure yet, but perhaps we can get the answer after exploring the castle. His expression began to become more dignified at this time. However, I can't even be sure what kind of dangers we will encounter in the castle. I can't even guarantee your safety, so I don't recommend that everyone enter the castle to explore. Thunder, you take some people and stay at the entrance to prevent the undead from breaking out. Kaloya and Baligan, follow me into the castle. You have attacked the castle before, so you should be more familiar with the terrain. The two former legendary heroes who were named nodded. After saying that, the Radiance Tower Master looked at Long Shua with a hint of inquiry. He could not make decisions for this Shinryu, so he could only rely on her own opinion. Long Shua said without thinking, "Don't worry about me. I can take care of myself." The Radiance Tower Master nodded. Well then, let's not delay any further. Let's set off immediately. The Modern Realm. The car slowly stopped in front of the gate of the suburban manor. Jin Zhongyuan's task as a guide was considered completed. It had to be said that the guide chosen by Peter Chan was indeed very sensible. After arriving at the destination, Jin Zhongyuan did not even have the intention to stay. He looked as if he did not intend to get any tips from Boss Luo. His sincerity was enough to make a good impression on Jin Zhongyuan. Then, I'll take my leave. Jin Zhongyuan gave out his card before getting into the car and smiled politely. Other than Losi, I'm quite familiar with this place. If you need anything in the future, you're welcome to find me. After all, I'll only be here for an hour at most. If there's a chance. Boss Luo nodded. Jin Zhongyuan did not stay any longer and directly drove away. After the car left the vicinity of the manor, the front gate of the manor slowly opened. The moment the door was opened, a figure gradually turned from an illusion to a real figure in front of the gate, wearing a gray scarf, Taisetsu. Are you used to living here? Luochio casually greeted. Boss Yuyi. Taisetsu slightly nodded, then came over to pick up the luggage and said calmly, the environment here is not bad. The residents of the town in front are also quite friendly. It's okay to live here for a short period of time. Taisetsu obviously did not intend to live here for a long time, if there were no instructions. It's more convenient to live here for the time being. Luochio smiled casually. Let's go in first. Taisetsu knew what the boss meant by more convenient. In fact, for his boss, no matter where, what was inconvenient? But some people would inevitably care. Taisetsu couldn't say anything, just nodded silently. It was Luochio who gave him a new life, and it was also Luochio who gave him a chance to make up for the past. So now his thoughts were very simple. Just follow this guy. Behind Luochio. Speaking of which, where's Nero? Miss Maid asked with a slight smile. I don't seem to see her. She went to town to buy some ingredients. Taisetsu said casually. Knowing that Miss Yu is coming, she took the initiative to add some ingredients for you when she saw that the ingredients in the kitchen were not enough. Oh, Miss Maid chuckled. Is it really like this? Of course. Taisetsu nodded, looking forward without any abnormality on his face. Miss Maid's smile gradually deepened. She turned her eyes to her master and said softly, "Before coming here, I was worried about whether you two would get along well. Now it seems that you two get along well. We all work for the boss. How can we have any conflicts?" Taisetsu said indifferently. "You worry too much." Taisetsu is really reliable. Miss Maid smiled slightly. "Is there anything you want to eat tonight? I'm very interested in cooking today." "Well, how about a small fry emperor?" Taisetsu was not pretentious. Of course. Later, Miss Maid was able to manage the Black Soul envoys very well. Luochio basically never worried about the Black Soul envoys. At this time, he did not intend to intervene in this kind of internal affairs. When the door of the house opened, Luochio suddenly waved his hand. Beside him, streams of light appeared like spirals and then gathered. Then, Luoya, who was as delicate as a doll, appeared here, holding a living pillow with both hands. Luoya slowly opened her eyes and looked at the house in front of her. At the same time, she naturally reached out to grab Luochio's hand. "You've worked hard these days." Luochio knew that she could only wake up for a limited time every day. At this time, he squatted down and stroked her head. "From now on, you can stay here with me. You don't have to stay in the shop anymore. When you wake up, you can walk outside freely. I'll let Taisetsu or Nero take care of you." This was something that Luochio had thought about before arriving in Britain. The reason for leaving China at first was actually not related to Luoya, but now he could incorporate Luoya's existence into it. However, Luoya did not show much willingness to go out at this time. Instead, she grabbed Boss Luo's hand more tightly. He patted the child's cheek, then turned back and said, "Yu Yi, take Luoya to choose a room she likes. My room is the same." "Boss, are you going out?" Taisetsu immediately guessed something. Luochio nodded and said, "I'll walk around the town and see if there's a suitable place to settle the shop." Unlike the previous boss Luo, who had always lived in the shop, the current boss Luo seemed to be more inclined to take care of the shop as a job. Since it was a job, there was a time to go to work and get off work. He would set a time for himself to go to work and leave every day. It was the same in the past, and he did not intend to change now. "Then I'll accompany you." Taisetsu nodded and volunteered. He knew that Miss Maid still had to take care of Luoya, so she naturally could not leave for the time being. And of course, it was best to have someone who could be ordered around the boss. "No, I'll walk around by myself." Luochio waved his hand. "Go, and help Yu Yi if she needs to do anything." "Understood." Taisetsu nodded. He did not insist. Naturally, it was much better than a certain old Taoist black soul who only knew how to flatter. Boss Luo was the kind of person who left whenever he wanted. After he went out temporarily, Miss Maid, who was very efficient, quickly found a room for Luoya that she liked. It was a room without a terrace, and on the contrary, it was not very spacious, the attic on the east side of the manor. But the ceiling here could be opened, and the Milky Way could be seen in the clear night. Luoya did not even have many requests, but Miss Maid took the initiative to add a delicate dressing table here. As for the sleeping place, as the pillow of Xing creation creatures, Mion could solve the problem very well. As long as she grew bigger, it would be a perfect bed that no mattress could compare to. At this time, Miss Maid was in front of the dressing table, combing Luo Ya's hair. This was Luo Ya's openness to outsiders. In the beginning, only Boss Luo was allowed to touch her, but now, she allowed Miss Maid to do some slightly intimate things, but she still did not say anything to anyone except Luochio. But Mion could. The time of being sleepy seems to have decreased. Miss Maid patiently combed Luo Ya's hair, which was not worse than hers, and seemed to enjoy it. The smile on her face became softer and softer. At this time, Luoya raised her head and looked at Yu Yi. She blinked and then nodded gently. Then she looked at herself in the mirror expressionlessly. At this time, Miss Maid's hand suddenly stopped. This made Luoya curious. and she looked at her curiously. Miss Maid smiled and said, "Well, it's a gadget I made in the past. It seems that a naughty guy broke in." Luoya tilted her head. She could understand, but she did not understand. Miss Maid waved her hand casually. On the table next to her, lines began to gradually appear in a three-dimensional manner, and finally built a three-dimensional model of a castle about 1 meter high. It was dark gray, and all the structures inside could be seen, just like transparent building blocks. Luoya seemed to be quite interested. She stood up from the stool and walked to the table. She blinked and approached the castle model. She observed it with great interest, occasionally looking back at Miss Maid. "I made it in the past, and it's been there for a long time." Yi smiled and said. Luoya blinked again and suddenly reached out to the castle. She tentatively pulled out a part in front of the castle gate with her fingers. Because of mechanics, this part suddenly scattered. Luoya was suddenly at a loss and froze on the spot. "It doesn't matter, just put them back." Miss Maid squinted and smiled. "Even if you don't put them back, they will recover after a while." Luoya blinked and picked up a fallen part. After thinking for a while, she put it on the collapsed place. She seemed to have found something interesting, and her interest was really aroused. Miss Maid did not speak, but silently accompanied her, showing a beautiful smile from time to time. "Is this the castle where the battle took place?" Standing in front of the huge castle gate, the Shinryu of Kelowna looked up. This place was even much bigger than the Xinyuan Palace. "Hey, Sister Long, what's that?" The little butterfly monster pointed up at this time. Above the sky, a pile of small black spots gradually fell, faster and faster, faster and faster. F***CK? Falling rocks. Dodge. Rumble. Chapter 14:27. Each of the bricks was at least 10 meters long. The moment they fell, it felt like a huge mountain was collapsing. Of course, such a huge falling stone was not a hopeless situation for the Kelowna Shinryu or for the Radiance Tower Master and the others. The Radiance Tower Master waved his magic staff to activate a layer of enchantment and easily blocked these huge bricks. But the question was, why did the castle collapse at this time? This castle had been taken over by the Magician Association since the war 100 years ago. In the past 100 years, the castle had been very peaceful and had never collapsed. However, when they thought of the undead warriors outside, they seemed to be able to explain the abnormality of the castle in some way. "These bricks can't be to welcome us, right?" Long Shirua frowned. After all the huge bricks fell, she casually jumped on one of them and looked up. She squatted down and reached out to tap the material of the brick under her feet, only to find that it was very hard. Even as the true dragon of the Divine Land, she needed to use a little bit of strength to pinch this thing. Her little bit of strength was enough to directly crush the diamond jade into pieces. While she was thinking, the stone under the Kelowna Shinryu's feet suddenly flew up automatically. At a terrifying speed, it suddenly rose into the sky. "Damn! What's happening now?" Long Shirua looked down in confusion and saw that the huge bricks that fell just now were flying back one by one. She only felt a huge black shadow appear above her head. When she looked up, she saw a huge brick directly pressing down on her. She subconsciously jumped to another place, and then another huge brick pressed down 4 times in a row. Kelowna Shinryu, who was a little angry, snorted coldly and directly punched the 5th huge brick that was about to press down on her. She was like a spring that had been charged to the limit, and her whole body shot straight up into the sky. Unexpectedly, the 5th huge stone brick was forcibly moved away at this moment, and then like a beautiful Tetris, it was directly inserted into another place. Kelowna Shinryu, who was soaring into the sky, really soared into the sky. F***CK. So cheap. When one of the parts of the castle in her hand was turned and then inserted into another place, Luoya looked outside at the part that she had cut back. It looked a little different from before. She couldn't help but show a trace of panic and timidity, looking up at the servant girl pitifully. The servant girl was naturally very gentle at this time. She gently patted Luoya's shoulder to show encouragement, and then said softly, "It's okay. If you're not satisfied with it, you can push it all away and then cut it in the way you want." Luoya blinked her eyes. During this period of time, this big sister of hers had been very good to her. As if she understood the meaning in Loya's eyes, the servant girl smiled and said, "This is not something important, just a toy. If Luoya liked it, she could take it apart and reassemble it." Because when she was making it, she had considered the possibility of completing different combinations. "So, you can just use these parts in the way you like." As if she felt the servant girl's encouragement and support, Loya nodded at this time. She looked again at the part of the castle that she had accidentally cut. After thinking for a while, she directly stretched out her hands. Push pa, la la la, like a stack of Lego blocks being pushed. A large area in front of the castle model was instantly scattered. Kelowna Shinryu, who didn't hit anything after spiraling into the sky, fell to the ground very gloomily. The little butterfly monster and the Radiance Tower Master, who were scattered around, quickly found her. "Old, Miss Long, are you okay?" The Radiance Tower Master asked with concern. The true dragon of the Divine Land shook his head, then stretched his neck and said, "It's nothing. I just don't know why, but I've been feeling very disgusted since just now. It's like I'm disgusted by someone. It's giving me goosebumps all over." The Radiance Tower Master nodded at this time with a heavy expression. This castle is indeed a bit strange. Looking at the appearance of these huge bricks, they seem to be alive. Everyone, be careful. There may be more dangers inside. Then hurry up and go in. It's fine if only a few things fall, but if all of them fall, it won't be fun, Kaloya said casually. The castle door was open, so they could easily see it. But at this time, as if to prove this legendary old werewolf hero's guess, hundreds and thousands of huge bricks fell from the sky in an instant. At this moment, it was as if the earth had welcomed a group of burning meteorites that cut through the atmosphere from above the stars. Hurry up and go in." At this moment, even the first Tower Master, Hui Yao, found it difficult to maintain his composure. He shouted loudly and waved his wand. A light shield enveloped him, Baligan, and Kiraloya at the same time. Then, he floated up and rushed into the castle gate. As for Long Shuao, after she raised her finger to greet these huge falling stones, she grabbed the back of the little butterfly's collar with one hand and followed closely behind Hui Yao, successfully entering the castle door. Pa la la la! Little Luo bent down and picked up a piece of the castle model that had fallen to the ground because she had pushed it away. Then, she approached it and looked at it in front of her eyes. The part was almost transparent. It was a gray, crystal-like thing. Her eyes seemed to be refracted by a Mitsubishi mirror and became round all of a sudden. The servant girl smiled at this time and said, "Miss Luo, I'll prepare afternoon tea for you. It's rare that you're not sleepy today. During this period, if you feel bored, you can play with this model. Don't worry about breaking it. It's quite sturdy." Luo Yin nodded silently. Then she turned around and looked at the castle model parts scattered on the table. She picked up a part and began to think. With a faint smile on her face, the servant girl slowly retreated from the attic. Since it was to prepare afternoon tea, it naturally had to be more exquisite. Therefore, it was necessary to spend a little more time, because Miss Luo Yu's master personally recognized her as his sister. As a qualified servant girl, this was self-cultivation. What's that sound? At the entrance of the barrier, the Thunder Tower Master and the two deacons who were guarding the inner area of the ancient city could not help but feel shocked after feeling the tremor of the earth at this time. It seems to have stopped. The Thunder Tower Master frowned. "But I didn't receive a message from the Radiance Tower Master. They should be fine. Maybe they just found something." The two deacons were naturally led by the Thunder Tower Master. At this time, they directly nodded, and their expressions were much calmer. The two deacons had only been in this position for a short time, and they were promoted after the Great Battle 100 years ago. Regarding the Great Battle 100 years ago, they had only seen some records of that year in the internal library of the association's headquarters. Now that they had a rare opportunity, they could not help but ask curiously, "Thunder Tower Master, I've read some documents before. According to the records, they are in existence more terrifying than demons. In the end, what is so terrifying about them? Why would they be attacked by the entire inhuman domain?" After a moment of silence, the Thunder Tower Master said, "You know about Yari's previous invasion, right?" Of course they knew, even clearly, because this happened 2 days ago. It was even the most terrifying disaster they had encountered since joining the association and becoming deacons. The Thunder Tower Master sighed and said, "At that time, Yari's was still the previous first Tower Master of the association, and he was supported by everyone. But I don't know when it started, but after coming into contact with the Yari's seemed to have changed into a different person. Not only did he secretly conduct many forbidden experiments, but in order to obtain enough souls as bargaining chips to make a deal with, he did not hesitate to start a war between countries in the modern world. In the end, the unsatisfied Yari's even planned to offer up the souls of his wife and daughter." The two deacons were now drenched in cold sweat as they listened. The Thunder Tower Master, on the other hand, was dispirited. "Actually, it's not just Yari's. Some of us have also secretly made deals with they behind their backs. Can you imagine when a country's entire governing body, from top to bottom, is corrupted and becomes an activity that exists with the flow of blood? What kind of situation would that country be in? Then, that country is not far from destruction," the deacons said softly. "That's right, it's not far from destruction." The Thunder Tower Master nodded. Fortunately, when the Radiance Tower Master returned from his travels in the East, he had a premonition that in the long run, non-humans would usher in the most terrifying destruction. This kind of deal itself is like the devil's temptation. Although it can continuously satisfy individuals, it is also like a bottomless abyss. One day, when we are unable to satisfy its needs, it will definitely devour us. So that was the reason for the Great War 100 years ago. The deacons were suddenly enlightened. If that's the case. But according to the documents, the various clans participated in the alliance back then, and there were heavy casualties. Then why didn't the Radiance Tower Master, the Scarlet Flame Tower Master, or even the Beast King, or the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans participate in the war? Do you think that if our strongest group of people had also participated in the battle, the casualties of the Allied forces would not have been so tragic? The Thunder Tower Master said indifferently, "You even included me in your calculations, but you were just too embarrassed to say in front of me, right?" They could only laugh awkwardly and bitterly. The Thunder Tower Master sighed and said, "It's not that we didn't want to participate in the war. It's that we had no way to participate." The two deacons were immediately puzzled. The Thunder Pagoda Master explained, "I just said that every department in this country from top to bottom has already fallen into this whirlpool. Although the coalition army was successfully formed through the efforts of the Radiance Pagoda Master, those who were secretly against it, those fellows who are unwilling to extricate themselves from the whirlpool obviously do not wish to see this shortcut destroyed." "You mean?" The deacons were shocked. "During the Great War back then, there were actually two factions. We needed to leave behind the highest combat power to restrict those who opposed us." The Thunder Tower Master smiled bitterly. "Isn't it ironic? Our own higher-ups actually helped the enemy to deal with our own people. Do you think that the Radiance Pagoda Master is willing to see such a young life with great potential die in vain? Back then, he had no other choice but to do so." In order to allow the alliance to set off smoothly, the Radiance Tower Master forcefully suppressed the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans, as well as 6 of the top 10 most wanted criminals in the inhuman domain back then. He couldn't free himself at all. As for us, we all had our own missions. The two deacons instantly fell silent. They were young and didn't know that there was such an inside story back then. At this moment, they only felt rather complicated. After the war, the Alliance won a Pyrrhic victory. The Thunder Tower Master shook his head. As for those who opposed us back then, naturally they also failed. Many of them were directly shut down. This was the origin of the association's 0-degree hell. As for those like the Grand Dukes of the 13 clans, because it involved an entire clan, the Radiance Tower Master could only give them some punishment in consideration of the stability of the inhuman domain. From then on, the 13 clans could only restrain the vampires and couldn't casually hunt humans in the modern world. As compensation, the Tower Master also agreed to move the large clans' farms in the modern world to the inhuman domain for free. Otherwise, with the cost of living in the inhuman domain, the 13 clans wouldn't even be able to afford it even if they sold themselves. Yes, it's our fortune to have a Radiance Tower Master in the association. The Thunder Tower Master shook his head and said in a voice that only he could hear, "Fortune? Perhaps. But actually, we're even dragging him down. Otherwise, with his talent, he might have been able to take the last step." The last step? The Thunder Tower Master muttered to himself, "The ultimate of magic. Seeing God. The ultimate of magic. Seeing God?" The deacons felt as if they had opened a new door today. Immediately, they looked at the oldest Tower Master with fervent gazes, hoping that he could say more. However, the Thunder Tower Master shook his head. "You are still improving and haven't reached the limit. Even if I tell you now, you won't understand. Let's finish our current path first." The Radiance Tower Master said that biting off more than one can chew is not good. Remember not to be impatient for results. Everything must be done step by step. Haste makes waste. The Radiance Tower Master is indeed a wise man, a wise man. We will definitely remember this. Suddenly, fog appeared. Chapter 1428. No one knew when it started, but a thin layer of fog started to appear on the streets of the ancient city. Very soon, the Thunder Tower Master felt that something was wrong. This place was shrouded by the association's barrier. Although it didn't isolate all conditions related to temperature, the sudden appearance of fog was clearly unreasonable. "Look, there's something approaching from the fog." At this moment, a deacon pointed in a certain direction in the fog. They all looked over and saw a figure slowly walking over from the gradually thickening fog. "It might be the undead here. Be careful." The Thunder Tower Master frowned. He was left here mainly to prevent these undead from rushing out of the barrier and wandering into the main world. "It doesn't seem to be." The deacon who discovered it first opened his palm and a ray of light shone over. The newcomer's footsteps were unsteady, and it seemed to be moving with great difficulty. It gradually became clearer and soon became visible under the direct illumination of the light source. "It's Lord Kiraloya." The Kiraloya in front of them seemed to be seriously injured. He covered his shoulder with one hand, as if he would collapse at any moment. There were many wounds on his body that kept bleeding. At this moment, Kiraloya raised his head with difficulty. His lips moved slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. Kiraloya finally fell to the ground. The Thunder Tower Master was shocked, but didn't act immediately. He only frowned. A deacon beside him had already rushed over to Kiraloya's side. "Lord Kiraloya, what happened to you? What happened? Where's our Tower Master?" The deacon hurriedly helped Kiraloya up from the ground and shook his body. But at this moment, Kiraloya's eyes were tightly shut, and he didn't move at all. The deacon's expression immediately became heavy. He helped Kiraloya up and walked back. However, when he looked at the Thunder Tower Master and the other deacon, he discovered a trace of fear in their eyes. "Be careful." He couldn't help but subconsciously shudder. In that instant, something had pierced through his back. It was a sharp black dagger. At this moment, the lightning in the Thunder Pagoda Master's palm was already surging, but in the end, he was still a step too slow. The deacon, whose body was pierced by the black sword, finally understood what was going on. He struggled to push away Kiraloya, who was beside him, and with a furious roar, he slapped Kiraloya fiercely with his palm. Flames suddenly appeared at the point of contact, followed by a violent explosion. The air current completely separated them. The deacon in his hand was sent flying towards the Thunder Tower Master by the air current, while the other deacon quickly reached out and caught him. That Kiraloya, who had been bounced off by the explosion, fell to the ground on the other side. But this Kiraloya's body gradually began to melt, and in the end, turned into a pile of black dust. "What's wrong with him?" The Thunder Pagoda Master hastily erected a wall of electricity around him and anxiously asked, "Already dead?" The Thunder Tower Master clenched his teeth as he looked at the deacon who had fallen into his companion's arms, his eyes filled with fear and anger. He quickly recognized a bottle of medicine and blurted out, "Stabilize his spiritual flame." It shouldn't be extinguished yet. And no, I can't feel it. It disappeared. His spiritual flame has disappeared. What? The Thunder Pagoda Master was both shocked and angry. But at this moment, his eyebrows suddenly jumped and he loudly shouted, "Dodge!" The Thunder Pagoda Master stretched out his finger and a bolt of electricity shot out from his fingertip. This deacon reacted quickly and instinctively lowered his head. The lightning narrowly brushed past his head and struck his back. There seemed to be something behind him. This deacon looked back in fear, only to see a gray figure standing behind him at an unknown time. And this figure was actually his companion, who had already died in his arms. His companion had actually turned into something similar to those undead in the ancient city. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the Thunder Pagoda Master once again acted, directly destroying the undead that the dead deacon had turned into. Then, he retracted the wall of electricity, protecting himself and the remaining deacon, but the corpse of the dead deacon could only be isolated outside the wall of electricity. In the end, what happened? Why did it happen in such a short time? It seems the Thunder Pagoda Master's expression was ugly. In this place, once someone dies, they will be transformed. Then, the remaining deacon was shocked. He thought of that Kiraloya who had attacked just now. Does that mean that the Radiance Pagoda Master and the others have already encountered danger? The Thunder Pagoda Master was silent, because at this moment, he realized that he had already lost any means of contacting the Radiance Pagoda Master. There was a thick fog here, which actually blocked all effective communication. Pagoda Master, we are now. The Thunder Pagoda Master lowered his head and muttered to himself. Then, he quickly said, "Take my token back to the headquarters and tell the Scarlet Blaze Pagoda Master and the others. They will know what to do." The Thunder Pagoda Master sternly said, "I will wait for them here." Okay. The deacon did not dare to hesitate. He only glanced at the corpse of his dead companion. After hesitating for a while, he rushed out of the entrance of the barrier and rushed to the coordinates, returning to the inhuman domain. In the ancient city inside the castle, Kelowna's Shinryu did not seem to be in a difficult situation at this time. However, her patience was gradually worn out to a certain extent because she was separated from the Radiance Pagoda Master and the others. In this inconceivably huge castle, Longshural led Luo Dance all the way forward. They did not encounter any enemies. Instead, they encountered the terrifying mechanisms of this castle. As they walked, the interior of the castle suddenly began to collapse. As they walked, the walls, ceiling, and even the ground of the castle suddenly began to move. They rotated, turned upside down, and even folded. It was impossible to guard against, and there was no sign at all. It was like walking into a constantly moving and reassembling labyrinth. There was no pattern at all. Longshural even made herself not touch anything. However, she still could not guard against the strange changes of this castle. Moreover, there was an extremely strong ability to isolate the breath. Kelowna's Shinryu could not even use her spiritual mind to search for the traces of Hui Yao and the others. Moreover, because of the constant changes inside the castle, she was not even sure where she was now. Not only that, Longshural also felt that her strength was also depleting quickly. Even if she stood still, her physical strength would be consumed at an incredible speed. Kelowna's Shinryu, who could not replenish her strength, gradually felt a little bit of pressure. On the contrary, the little butterfly monster did not feel the same. Her movements were very normal. It seemed that the stronger the strength, the stronger the suppression, and so on. Kelowna's Shinryu thought to herself, "Should I pay the previous bill and continue to use the intelligence channel? But if I draw out the essence blood in this place..." "Sister Long, it seems to have stopped," the little butterfly monster said quickly at this time. Before this, they were hiding in a small empty room that they found on the road. There was nothing in this small room, but it was constantly moving. Until now, the movement had stopped. Longshural frowned, tentatively walked to the door of the room, and opened it. But the moment the door was opened, she was faced with a sealed wall. The only entrance and exit of this room was inexplicably blocked. Who the hell designed this castle? At this time, the room shook violently again. The shaking was as if the whole world was turning over, turning upside down, rotating and shaking. She used Shinryu's power to protect herself and Luo dance at the same time. At this time, there were like rubber balls bouncing around in this room, bouncing around, bouncing around, bouncing around, bouncing around. What the hell? Is there an end to this? Kelowna's Shinryu even felt that her stomach began to surge. It was about the size of a sugar cube, and now it was in Luo Ya's hand. She stopped shaking this small cube in her hand and then approached her eyes. She felt like she saw something inside, but suddenly she didn't seem to see anything. Sensing the strangeness, Loya instinctively continued to shake the small cube. After shaking it back and forth a few times, she felt like she didn't see anything. Luo Ya tilted her head and soon shifted her attention from this cube to another place, the model of the castle. After a few reconstructions, the originally Romanesque-style castle had become a pile of messy bricks. Little Master is so awesome. Even so, Soft, the Xing creation creature who accompanied her, praised it this time. It even said very cleverly, "If Master sees this, he will definitely praise you." Really? Luo Ya asked softly. Of course. Regardless of whether it was true or not, this was the right time. As a Xing creation creature who was entrusted with the task of accompanying Luo Ya, how to make this little master happy was something this Xing creation creature thought about almost every day. Ah yes. At this time, Soft suddenly expanded itself. Its skin even began to bulge at this time, and the bulge even became three-dimensional, and then it turned into the appearance of an ancient Chinese palace building. Xing creation creature had the memory of before it was given life. This Xing creation creature had stayed in Luochio's house for several years before it became Xing creation creature. I remember that Master used to like to watch some scenery movies. Little Master, Mian Mian said seriously. Oh right, there's this too. The surface bulged again, and next to the palace, a small pyramid stood up. Looking at the building that Soft made based on its memory, Luo Ya blinked, and then looked at the pile of indescribable things that she made, and after thinking for a moment, she stretched out her small hand, expressionlessly, and pushed pack. Crash! The parts scattered again. Luo Ya began to pile them up again. Under the attic window, Taisetsu just got a water pipe and then sprinkled water on the grass in the back garden. In the kitchen not far away, Miss Maid's figure could be seen occasionally, and the smell of baked biscuits was very pleasant. Taisetsu looked up at the sun in the sky, yawned, and said lazily, "Peaceful days are really good." The school was a place where one could see the sea. After leaving the manor, Boss Luo casually walked on the edge of the coastline for a while, and then began to walk to the town outside the school. A place full of tranquility. This was Boss Luo's impression so far. Even if the students in the school were included, there would not be many people here, and naturally, there would not be too many shops. After all, the market of the town was only so big. If there were more shops, it would not be able to accommodate them. If the club was placed in such a place, the chances of attracting customers on weekdays would naturally be greatly reduced. If it weren't for the other projects that could continuously and steadily increase his income, Boss Luo himself would have to consider whether it was appropriate to set up a store here because of his usual extravagance. He had actually found a few places that he liked and could set up the shop, but there was no place for the time being that could really be decided. It might be a good thing to have a choice, but the most terrible thing was that he didn't even have the chance to choose, or he had lost the idea of choosing. He stopped at a place like a small park at the corner of the street. Boss Luo felt Nero here, and it was easy to find her in this place. On a tree, on the branch, there were 2 shopping bags full of things hanging at this time. Nero was lying on the branch at this time, resting her head on her hands, chewing gum, and blowing a big bubble from time to time. Obviously, she was very comfortable. The reason why she didn't notice Boss Luo's arrival was Luochio didn't intend to let Nero notice his arrival immediately. At this time, several children were playing under the tree. In the eyes of some adults, maybe it was just children playing if they didn't see some bullying. The little boy who was being bullied looked to be only 5 or 6 years old. He had a head of thick brown hair. He was being teased by several older children. The balloon in the little boy's hand was taken away. He was so short that he couldn't get his things back from the taller children. Nero on the tree was obviously not interested in this scene. She even yawned out of boredom, until the balloon that was taken away flew to the tree because the older child didn't hold it firmly. It gently hit her hanging leg. The Black Soul envoy lying on the tree looked down. The children subconsciously looked up at the balloon that flew to the branch and then got stuck. They didn't see anything at first, but suddenly a beautiful elder sister with short white hair appeared on the branch. The children were all stunned. Even the little boy who had his balloon snatched away was dumbfounded at this moment. Suddenly, this good-looking big sister with short white hair suddenly turned into an old woman with pus oozing out of her mouth. Her eyeballs even fell out her head. Wow! The children suddenly fell to the ground and then screamed and ran away from this place. Nero on the tree gave a very happy laugh at this time. She took out an apple from the shopping bag and ate it. Nero returned to her original appearance, looking down at the tree again, and said casually, "Kid, are you not afraid?" Balloon. The little boy resisted the panic and looked at Nero bravely. Nero tilted her head and looked at the balloon that could be stuck next to her. Suddenly, a bitch's smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She took another bite of the apple and bit the core. Then, she spat out the core of the apple. Bang! The balloon was shot by the core of the apple, and the broken balloon and the string fell down. There seemed to be something tied to the string, like a small piece of paper. The little boy's eyes suddenly turned red, but he didn't say anything, just silently picked up the thing, wiped his eyes, and slowly left this place. Nero on the tree looked sideways and took another bite of the apple. It seemed to be sour. Chapter 14:29. When Boss Luo was about to show up, Nero suddenly jumped down from the tree with a shopping bag. Luaccio stopped. Nero began to walk towards the direction of the leaving child, seemingly intending to follow him. After Nero walked out of the small park, he came to the tree and looked around. Then he closed his eyes, and his vision was reconstructed in a three-dimensional way in his mind. Boss Luo found something. He opened his eyes and moved slightly. In the next moment, he had already appeared on the top of a slightly higher building in the town. On a sign sticking out from the roof of the building, a hooked balloon was swinging with the wind. The balloon was obviously much smaller than its original size. It seemed that it had been hooked here for some time. Maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before. The thin string wrapped around the pole of the sign began to unravel automatically, and the free balloon finally fell into Boss Luo's hand. He tore off the small note tied to the end of the thin string and opened it to take a look. "I don't want to die." The sea breeze blew, and suddenly, the small note was blown away from Luaccio's hand away. Mr. Smith was the chef and owner of a restaurant in the town. He had a beautiful wife and a 5-year-old child, Joe. The restaurant's business had always been good. Although he was busy with work, Mr. Smith's life was full and happy because this family would welcome a new baby this year. Because Mr. Smith's wife, Deborah, was 8 months pregnant and was about to give birth. Whether it was the neighbors or the regular customers of the restaurant, they were sincerely happy for this upcoming baby. After the new year, in order to take care of Deborah, who was pregnant for the second time, Mr. Smith's mother temporarily came here from her hometown. This indeed made Mr. Smith much more relaxed. Outside the restaurant, today's menu was written on a small blackboard. A regular customer was looking at the menu and thinking. At this moment, a 5-year-old boy walked over with his head down. "Hey, Joe, are you okay?" The customer stopped the little boy who was about to walk into the restaurant with his head down. The little boy just nodded, but there was no smile on his face. It was too easy for adults to grasp a child's unhappy mood. The customer looked at the dirt on Joe and seemed to know something. He took out a tissue and wiped Joe's slightly dirty face and clothes. "Joe, were you bullied?" "Little boy." Joe still shook his head. "But I see you're unhappy, Joe." The customer put his hands on Joe's shoulders. "Son, if you don't tell the truth, you may become a dishonest child, and you will be punished. Your nose will become very long, and it will hit the ceiling, so you will be very painful. You will even end up like Pinocchio." Joe was silent for a long time, and suddenly said something that surprised the old customer. "If I become Pinocchio, I won't die." The old customer was stunned. Then, he looked at the child strangely and frowned. "Joe, do you know what you're saying?" Joe nodded. "Pinocchio didn't die. He didn't die in the end in the story." The old customer thought for a while. "Son, why do you feel like you will die?" Joe said with a look of fear, "Because I saw Mr. Death. My grandma said that death will take away life. It will take me away." The old customer opened his mouth, thought for a while, and walked directly into the restaurant with Joe. The staff naturally recognized Joe, the boss's child, and immediately greeted him to the counter to take care of him. The old customer found Mr. Smith, who was busy in the kitchen, and told him about Joe. Mr. Smith, who had recently put on weight, listened to the old customer's description very patiently. After thinking about it, he said, "Oh, old George, thank you for telling me about Joe. Please forgive me for being too busy. Maybe if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't even know about Joe. He may just feel uneasy." Customer. Old George patted Mr. Smith's shoulder comfortingly at this time. "Maybe because Deborah is about to give birth, you all ignored Joe's feelings. Smith, children at this age are very sensitive and fragile. When the lunch market is over, I will have a good talk with Joe." Mr. Smith promised. "I know you will be a good father." Old George smiled. "Then today's lunch will be the signature roast duck breast set. I'm really hungry." "As you wish, sir." Mr. Smith put on the chef's hat again and walked into the kitchen. There were not many customers at noon today, and Mr. Smith soon had some free time. He walked up to Joe with a bowl of mushroom soup that he had made himself. He looked at Joe's dirty clothes, patted them carefully a few times, and suddenly said, "Joe, do you have anything to say to me?" Joe drank the mushroom soup silently, pursing his lips from time to time. Mr. Smith suddenly felt guilty. Maybe he really neglected the child's feelings during this time. His family was busy and happy with his wife's upcoming birth, and gradually did not pay so much attention to Joe's affairs. So, Mr. Smith picked up Joe and put him on his lap. He wiped the soup stain on Joe's mouth and smiled. "Joe, when summer vacation comes, I will go to sea with you, just like we did last year." When summer vacation came, his wife Deborah would successfully give birth to the second child, and he would have more free time. Indeed, he could spend more time with his eldest son. "Really?" Joe seemed to be in high spirits. Mr. Smith held out his hand, and Joe also held out his hand. The big and small palms clapped, then clenched into fists, and then hammered each other. Mr. Smith smiled. "It's a promise. I have never broken our promise. You should know, Joe." Joe nodded. Mr. Smith rubbed Joe's head. "Then you have to promise me that you will forget the story your grandmother told you. Believe me, this is just an old story your grandmother used to scare disobedient children. It is not true. In this world, there is no such thing as Mr. Death." Joe said, "But I saw it. You were just dreaming." Mr. Smith could not help but smile. "Listen to me. Your great-grandmother was a naughty person. I was also scared when I was young, but I later learned that it was all a lie." Joe thought for a moment and said, "Smith, did you see Mr. Death when you were young?" Mr. Smith had some experience in raising children. At this moment, he nodded seriously and said, "I saw it, but I knew it was just a dream. After I grew up, I never saw it again. Of course, if you become more obedient, Joe, you won't see it again." Joe nodded dubiously. Mr. Smith put him down from his lap and said casually, "Do you want another serving of grilled chicken meatballs?" Joe thought for a moment. In the end, he could not resist the problem of his stomach and nodded. At this moment, the door of the restaurant was pushed open by someone, and a young Oriental girl with dyed white hair walked in just like that. Her smile was very special, giving people the feeling that she was secretly revealing her little tale. She was like a wandering little monster who liked to play pranks on Halloween. Why did she dye it? Because Mr. Smith felt that there were few young people in the world who had such white hair. If she was an albino, at least the other body hair should be white. Of course, this wasn't anything out of the ordinary. In terms of individuality, there were many students in the school not far away who were extremely individualistic. What he was really curious about was the face of this Asian. There were not many Asians here. Mr. Smith basically had an impression of them, but the one in front of him looked very unfamiliar. Is she a freshman who just arrived? With such doubts in his heart, Mr. Smith walked out from the counter and came to the beautiful girl with short white hair. Is there anything I can help you with? The girl with short white hair. Nero looked around and naturally saw the little boy from the park who was sitting in the children's chair and poking his head out from the counter. Joe. Joe saw Nero's gaze at this moment and retracted his head at once. Is there anything else to eat? I haven't had lunch yet. Nero lifted the shopping bag in her hand at this time. I am a poor person who is being exploited by an unscrupulous boss. Oh, Mr. Smith found it interesting, so he smiled and said, Then I recommend you try our celebrity package today. It will help you recover your strength. Then let's have 4 portions first. Nero narrowed her eyes and smiled. Before Mr. Smith asked in surprise, she said directly, I can finish it. Don't worry. Then, please wait a moment. Mr. Smith nodded, then asked the waiter who was cleaning up the table after old George finished his lunch to come over and greet this strange girl. She sat down at a table facing the counter. Joe, at the counter, quietly poked his head out again at this time. This time Nero did not look at him, but just stared out of the window. Joe became bolder, and his neck gradually stretched out at this time. Unexpectedly, Nero suddenly turned back at this moment. Nero's neck suddenly stretched extremely long at this time, like the legendary long-necked monster. Her neck quickly circled a few times in the air and finally sent her head to Joe. She even turned into a ferocious grin with a green face. Joe couldn't help but be shocked. He fell directly from the children's chair and knocked over the unfinished mushroom soup, spilling it all over his body. Joe covered his mouth with his hands in horror, as if he was frightened and couldn't speak. The waiter who was working heard the movement and quickly came over to pick Joe up. But Joe just pointed at the customer who had just arrived, sitting by the window. The waiter looked over in confusion, but all he saw was Nero eating an appetizer salad. There was nothing special about her. The waiter shook his head and had to put down Joe, who was a little strange today. He then took off his coat and planned to go to the bathroom to wash it first. Kid, sit here and don't go away, okay? I'll be right back. Joe grabbed the waiter's arm tightly, and he was so anxious that he seemed to be about to cry. Let me take care of this child for you. Nero suddenly looked over at this time and smiled with a rather charming smile. I like children very much. The waiter hesitated for a moment, but suddenly felt as if there was a voice in his mind urging him to agree. He nodded woodenly and then became silent. He silently picked up Joe and then came to Nero's side. Ignoring Joe's reaction, he sat him down next to Nero and then left with the swollen clothes expressionlessly. Joe was horrified to find that his hands and feet were tied to the chair by a black shadow. He couldn't move at all. At this moment, Nero suddenly picked up a fork and a table knife and began to rub them in front of Joe, making the wrong sound of hua 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 hua. Oh, I haven't eaten children's meat for a long time. I'm so hungry. Nero's mouth cracked open all the way to her earlobes, revealing blood-red gums and sharp teeth that were like saw teeth. Are you Mr. Death? Joe suddenly asked with a hint of sobbing. Nero, who was sharpening the knife, blinked when she heard the words. Then, she knocked the table with the handle of the knife in dissatisfaction. Witch. I'm the witch who eats children. Haven't you heard of the story of the candy house? Joe shook his head. Boring. Nero suddenly yawned, threw the knife and fork on the table casually, and waved her hand with a look of disgust. Go play by yourself. In this way, the black shadow that imprisoned Joe's hands and feet suddenly disappeared. Perhaps one could never imagine the thinking of a 5-year-old child. At this moment, Joe was no longer afraid. He jumped down from the chair and ran around the table to Nero. He looked up at Nero curiously. What are you looking at? I'm really going to eat you. Nero opened her mouth again. Joe blinked. Nero sneered. Her mouth turned into a big mouth and directly swallowed Joe whole. But after swallowing, she immediately spat him out. See, like this, I'm going to eat you, Nero said while picking her ears. At this time, Joe suddenly reached out and pulled the corner of Nero's clothes. Are you really not Mr. Death? No. Nero lowered her face and stared at the little boy. I'm Sister Death. Call me Sister. Well, what the hell is Mr. Death? Is there something wrong with this kid's head?